Story 1. My sister refused to take care of my son for just one day, even after I had paid for her entire wedding. She said, "I'm not your maid." So I took a drastic step. Before continuing the story, let us know in the comments which city you're watching from. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell so you won't miss more stories, and leave your like on the video. My name is Alexandra, and 3 hours ago, I did something that will change my family forever. I canceled my sister's entire wedding, a wedding I had been paying for completely, and I'm not sorry. The last call I made was to the florist, canceling the imported orchids that cost more than my monthly mortgage. As I hung up, my hands weren't shaking anymore. For the first time in months, I felt absolutely calm. The silence in my apartment was deafening after weeks of constant wedding planning chaos, but it was the most peaceful silence I'd experienced in years. My phone is buzzing nonstop on the kitchen counter. 53 missed calls and counting. I can see the names flashing, Mom, Dad, Minha, Irma over and over again. But I'm not answering, not yet. I need these quiet moments to process what just happened because, honestly, I'm still trying to believe I actually did it. Let me be clear about something. I'm a trauma surgeon. I save lives for a living. I make split-second decisions under pressure that can mean the difference between life and death. I've never been impulsive or reckless. Every choice I make is calculated, measured, and thought through completely. So, when I tell you that canceling this wedding was the most rational decision I've made in years, I need you to understand that I mean it. But I'm getting ahead of myself. You're probably wondering how a successful doctor ends up in a situation where she's financing her sister's entire wedding, only to cancel it at the last minute. The truth is, this story doesn't start today. It doesn't even start when my sister announced her engagement 6 months ago. This story begins years ago with a pattern of behavior that I was too loyal, too hopeful, and frankly, too stupid to see clearly until today. I grew up being the responsible one. While my sister was getting her nails done and posting Instagram stories about her latest shopping sprees, I was studying for medical school entrance exams. While she was dating a series of unemployed guys who looked like they stepped out of a boy band, I was working through residency, saving every penny I could. My parents were always so proud of her social life, her beauty, and her ability to light up a room. Meanwhile, I was just practical, reliable, the one who would figure things out. After I finally established my practice, something shifted in our family dynamic. Suddenly, I wasn't just the responsible daughter anymore. I was the successful daughter, the one with money. And with that success came expectations I never agreed to. At first, it was small things. Help with Mom and Dad's mortgage when Dad's business was struggling. A few hundred here and there to help with family expenses. I was happy to help. These are my parents, after all. But then I started noticing things. Designer purses appearing in my sister's closet, new cars, and expensive dinners she'd post about online. When I asked my parents about it, they'd get uncomfortable and change the subject. It took me months to piece together what was happening. The money I was giving them wasn't staying with them. It was being redistributed to fund my sister's lifestyle, and everyone just expected me to be okay with it because I was the one who had it to spare. The breaking point should have come then, but it didn't. I should have cut off the financial support and forced everyone to face reality. Instead, I convinced myself that family loyalty meant swallowing my resentment and continuing to be the reliable safety net everyone took for granted. Growing up in the Morrison household meant understanding an unspoken hierarchy that I didn't fully grasp until I was well into adulthood. My sister was the princess, and I was the workhorse. She got the pink bedroom with the canopy bed. I got the smaller room that doubled as Dad's home office. She got dance lessons and pageant entries. I got library cards and secondhand textbooks. It wasn't necessarily malicious. My parents genuinely believed they were playing to our strengths. She was their social butterfly, and I was their little scholar. The problem was that this dynamic created a family structure where my achievements were expected and her needs were prioritized. When I graduated valedictorian, the celebration dinner lasted about an hour because we had to rush to my sister's cheerleading competition. When I got accepted to medical school with a partial scholarship, my parents were proud but immediately started worrying about how they'd help with my remaining expenses. When my sister decided she wanted to try modeling and needed professional headshots that cost $1,500, they found the money somewhere. I learned early that love in our family was measured differently for each of us. My sister received unconditional adoration regardless of what she did or didn't accomplish. My love was earned through grades, achievements, and increasingly financial contributions. I became the family fixer, the one everyone turned to when problems needed practical solutions. After medical school and residency, when I finally started earning real money, the pattern intensified. My parents would call with emergencies. The water heater breaking, unexpected car repairs, medical bills they couldn't handle. I always said yes because that's what a good daughter does, right? But I started noticing that these emergencies coincided suspiciously with my sister's desire for new things. The monthly allowance I provided my parents, which I thought was helping them maintain their dignity in retirement, was actually funding my sister's spa appointments, her weekend trips to the coast, and her constantly rotating wardrobe of designer clothes she'd wear once and forget about. She was 26 years old, living rent-free in our parents' house with no job, no responsibilities, and apparently no sense of irony about the situation. What hurt wasn't the money itself. I was doing well financially, and helping family should be a privilege of success. What hurt was the complete lack of acknowledgement. My sister never thanked me, never even mentioned where her lifestyle was actually coming from. In her mind, and apparently everyone else's, she deserved these things simply by virtue of being who she was. Meanwhile, I was working 60-hour weeks, raising my 8-year-old daughter Emma as a single mother, and somehow still finding time to be everyone else's emergency contact. When my sister got a DUI, guess who got the call at 2 in the morning? When she decided she wanted to take art classes in Europe for a summer, guess who was expected to make that dream possible? The worst part was how she treated me during family gatherings. She'd make subtle comments about my work clothes, my lack of a social life, or my practical car. To everyone else, these seemed like sisterly teasing, but they carried an undertone of superiority that stung. Here I was funding her entire existence, and she acted like I was the one who should be grateful for her presence in our lives. I kept telling myself this was temporary, that eventually she'd grow up, get serious about her life, and maybe show some appreciation for everything our family was doing for her. I believed that unconditional support would eventually inspire her to become more independent and responsible. I was naive enough to think that love and patience could change someone who didn't see any reason to change. The moment I truly understood how naive I'd been was during last year's Thanksgiving dinner. I was sitting at our family table, exhausted from a particularly brutal week at the hospital, when my sister casually mentioned her new handbag, a designer piece that cost more than most people's monthly rent. She was showing it off to our cousin, explaining how she'd been saving up for months for this purchase. Saving up? With what income? She hadn't worked a real job in over 3 years. I excused myself to help our mother in the kitchen, but really, I needed a moment to process the absurdity of what I just heard. In the kitchen, I found receipts scattered across the counter, evidence of Mom's latest grocery run that I'd funded, along with what looked like credit card statements. I couldn't help but notice the dates and amounts, and everything started clicking into place. The $1,500 I'd sent for their emergency roof repair the previous month had been spent the same day my sister posted Instagram photos of her shopping spree at the premium outlets. The $2,000 I'd transferred for Dad's medical tests coincided exactly with my sister's weekend spa retreat. Every family emergency I'd responded to corresponded with some new luxury in my sister's life. I confronted my parents quietly that evening, hoping there was some explanation I was missing. Mom got defensive immediately, claiming they needed to help my sister find herself, and that my success meant I should be happy to support family. Dad looked uncomfortable but didn't contradict her. The conversation ended with Mom crying and saying I was being selfish for questioning how they chose to spend money I'd given them. But the real wake-up call came 3 weeks later when I overheard my sister on the phone with a friend, laughing about how easy it was to get money from our parents. I just have to mention something I want, and somehow they always figure out how to make it happen, she said, clearly amused by the situation. It's like having wealthy parents without any of the pressure to actually be successful myself. Wealthy parents. She thought our parents were wealthy. She had no idea that every dollar she was spending came directly from my paychecks, from overtime shifts I was pulling at the hospital, and from sacrifices I was making in my own life and my daughter's life. In her mind, money just appeared when she needed it, as if by magic. The irony was devastating. Here I was, a successful surgeon who could afford a comfortable life, and I was driving a 10-year-old sedan because I was funneling most of my disposable income to subsidize my sister's fantasy lifestyle. Emma was attending the local public school instead of the private academy I'd researched, because that tuition money was going toward my sister's art classes and yoga retreats and whatever other hobby struck her fancy that month. And through it all, my sister treated me like I was somehow lesser than her. At family gatherings, she'd make comments about my boring life, my focus on work, or my lack of romantic relationships. She acted like my practical approach to life was a character flaw, as if being responsible and hardworking were things to be pitted rather than respected. The most painful moment came during Emma's 8th birthday party, which I'd kept small and simple because I was trying to be more careful with expenses. My sister arrived late, made a comment about the cute little homemade decorations, and then spent the entire party on her phone planning her next trip with friends. She didn't bring a gift, didn't help with setup or cleanup, and left early to meet someone for drinks. But she posted a selfie with Emma on her social media, captioned, "Love being the fun aunt," as if her mere presence was the highlight of the event. I realized that night that I wasn't helping my sister grow or find herself. I was enabling her to remain a permanent child, shielded from the reality that everyone else has to work for what they want in life. Worse, I was teaching my own daughter that family relationships are transactional, that love means accepting disrespect as long as you're helping someone financially. 6 months ago, my sister burst through my parents' front door like she was announcing the cure for cancer. I was there for our monthly family dinner, watching Emma play in the backyard while I helped set the table. The front door slammed open and my sister practically flew into the dining room, her left hand thrust forward like a weapon. "I'm engaged!" she screamed, loud enough that our elderly neighbor probably heard it through the walls. The ring was massive. I'm talking about a diamond so large it looked almost cartoonish, set in what appeared to be platinum with smaller stones surrounding it. Even from across the room, I could tell this wasn't some budget engagement ring. This was the kind of ring that cost more than most people's cars. My parents went absolutely insane with excitement. Mom started crying immediately, pulling my sister into a hug and examining the ring from every angle. Dad was beaming, asking a dozen questions about proposal details and wedding plans. I stood there holding a stack of plates, trying to process what I was seeing and hearing. "Tell us everything," Mom demanded, and my sister launched into what sounded like a rehearsed speech about how her boyfriend, who I'd never met and barely heard mentioned, had surprised her with a romantic beachside proposal just that morning. "He's incredibly successful," she explained breathlessly. "He owns multiple businesses, travels internationally for work, and he's been planning this proposal for months. He said he knew I was the one from our first date, and he wanted to make sure the ring was worthy of me." I finally found my voice. "What's his name again? I don't think you've ever really told us about him." My sister's expression flickered for just a moment, but she recovered quickly. "His name is Connor, and you haven't met him because he's been traveling constantly for work. He's an import-export, deals with high-end clients all over the world. Very exclusive, very lucrative." The details she provided were oddly vague for someone describing the love of her life. She couldn't say exactly which cities he traveled to, what specific products he imported or exported, or even how long they'd been seriously dating. When I asked where he was now, she said he had to fly to Los Angeles immediately after the proposal for an emergency business meeting. But my parents didn't seem to notice the inconsistencies. They were too busy planning the wedding of the century, talking about venues and guest lists, and whether 6 months was enough time to plan properly. My sister was eating up every second of attention, describing her vision for the perfect ceremony with the confidence of someone who had unlimited resources to make it happen. "We're thinking spring wedding, maybe at the Grandview Manor downtown," she said casually, as if she was suggesting a backyard barbecue instead of the most expensive wedding venue in our city. "Connor says money is no object when it comes to our special day. He wants me to have everything I've ever dreamed of." I did some quick mental math. Grandview Manor starts at $15,000 just for the venue rental, before food, flowers, music, or anything else. A wedding there could easily cost $40,000 or more, depending on how elaborate they wanted to make it. That sounds expensive, I said carefully. Are you sure Connor's business can handle that kind of expense while he's still building his companies? My sister gave me a look like I just suggested she was marrying someone inappropriate. Alexandra, Connor is incredibly successful. More successful than anyone in our family has ever been. Money really isn't a concern for us. The phrase anyone in our family hit me like a slap. I'm a surgeon. I've worked for over a decade to build a successful practice. I own my own home, support my daughter comfortably, and have been single-handedly funding our family's lifestyle for years. But apparently, my sister's mysterious fiancé with his vague import-export business was more successful than my actual verifiable career. Over the following weeks, the wedding planning consumed every family conversation. My sister would call me with updates about dress shopping, venue tours, and catering options, but Connor never seemed to be available to meet. He was always traveling, always in meetings, always just about to return from some important business trip that would get delayed at the last minute. 2 months after the engagement announcement, I got the call I should have seen coming. It was a Saturday afternoon, and I was at the park with Emma when my phone rang. My mother's voice sounded strained, almost apologetic, which immediately put me on alert. Alexandra, honey, we need to talk about the wedding, she began carefully. Could you maybe stop by the house this evening? There's been a complication. Complication. In our family's vocabulary, that was code for someone needs money and you're the only person who has it. I found my parents sitting at their kitchen table that evening looking like they were about to deliver terrible news. My sister was conspicuously absent, which should have been my first clue about what this conversation was really about. The thing is, Dad started hesitantly, Connor's been having some cash flow issues with his business. Nothing permanent, just some international deals that got delayed due to shipping complications. His money is all tied up in inventory that's stuck in customs. I sat down slowly, already understanding where this was headed. And well, your sister has her heart set on having the wedding as planned, Mom continued. She's already put deposits down on several vendors, and Connor feels terrible that his business situation might force them to postpone or scale back their dream wedding. How much are we talking about? I asked, though I suspected I already knew the answer would be astronomical. Dad cleared his throat. The total budget they'd settled on was around $35,000. Connor has assured us he'll pay back every penny once his business situation stabilizes, which should be within the next few months. $35,000 for one day. I felt my chest tighten as I processed the enormity of what they were asking. That was more than I'd spent on my own wedding years ago. More than I spent on my daughter's entire education expenses annually. More than most people make in 6 months. You want me to pay for my sister's entire wedding? I said flatly. Not pay for it, Mom corrected quickly. Loan the money to Connor. He's going to pay it back with interest once his deals go through. You'd actually make money on this arrangement. The awkward silence that followed told me everything I needed to know about how confident they really were in Connor's ability to repay this loan. If they truly believed he was good for the money, they would have found a way to borrow it themselves or suggested Connor get a business loan from an actual bank. Where's my sister during this conversation? I asked. Shouldn't she be here discussing her own wedding finances? She's too emotional about the whole situation, Dad explained. She's been crying for days about the possibility of having to cancel everything. Connor suggested we talk to you, family to family, so she wouldn't have to go through the stress of explaining their financial situation. Family to family. As if this was some kind of collaborative decision instead of a desperate attempt to manipulate me into funding a wedding that the actual couple couldn't afford. I asked to see the contracts and deposit receipts my sister had already signed. The numbers were even worse than I'd imagined. She'd committed to a photographer who charged $8,000. The florist alone was $4,000. The dress she'd chosen cost $3,000 for a single day, for one outfit she'd never wear again. These are luxury prices, I pointed out. If money is tight, why didn't she choose more reasonable options? Connor insisted she shouldn't have to compromise on her dream wedding just because of temporary business difficulties, Mom explained. He said a woman like your sister deserves the best, and he didn't want her to feel like she was settling for less than she's worth. That phrase stuck with me. A woman like your sister. What did that mean exactly? A woman who'd never worked for anything in her life. A woman who expected other people to pay for her dreams while she contributed nothing. A woman who thought she deserved luxury simply by virtue of existing. They sat there looking at me with hopeful expressions, waiting for me to be the family hero once again. And despite every rational thought in my head screaming that this was a terrible idea, I felt the familiar weight of family obligations settling on my shoulders. I need to think about it, I said finally. Of course, Dad said quickly. But the thing is, some of these deposits are due pretty soon, and if we don't secure the vendors. The unspoken threat was clear. If I didn't agree immediately, I'd be responsible for ruining my sister's wedding dreams. Against every instinct I possessed as both a doctor and a rational human being, I said yes. I agreed to pay for the entire wedding, justified by the promise that Connor would repay everything with interest once his business dealings were resolved. It was one of the stupidest decisions I've ever made, and I knew it even as the words were leaving my mouth. The moment I agreed, the dynamic in that kitchen shifted dramatically. The tension disappeared. My parents' faces lit up with relief, and suddenly I was no longer a daughter being asked for help. I was a solution to be managed and directed. Oh, thank you, sweetheart, Mom gushed, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. Your sister is going to be so relieved. You have no idea how worried she's been about this. But when my sister finally appeared at the house an hour later, her response wasn't relief or gratitude. It was a list of additional requirements. Now that the money issue is sorted out, she announced, I want to make sure we're all clear about expectations. This wedding needs to be perfect, which means I can't have anyone making decisions that might embarrass me or reflect poorly on Connor's reputation. I stared at her, waiting for some acknowledgement of what I just agreed to do for her. Some thank you, some recognition that I was making an enormous personal sacrifice to fund her dream day. Instead, she pulled out a notebook filled with wedding details and started assigning me tasks. I'll need you to handle all the vendor communication since you're the one with the financial relationship now, she said matter-of-factly. But obviously, I'll be making all the actual decisions about flowers, food, music, everything important. I just need you to execute the payments and handle any problems that come up. Execute the payments. Handle the problems. I was being relegated to the role of wedding coordinator/ATM, responsible for all the stress and logistics, but none of the creative decisions. $35,000, and my job was to shut up and write checks while my sister played bride. What about Connor? I asked. When do I actually get to meet the man I'm essentially financing? He's still dealing with the customs situation, she said dismissively. But he's incredibly grateful for what you're doing. He said it shows what kind of family values we have, how we support each other when it matters. Family values. I was supposed to feel proud that my willingness to bankroll their wedding demonstrated good family values. Meanwhile, where were my sister's family values when it came to acknowledging the sacrifice I was making? Over the next few days, my phone became a constant stream of wedding-related demands. The florist needed a deposit increase because my sister had decided she wanted additional centerpieces. The photographer required travel expenses because she changed the ceremony location to a more scenic spot outside the city. The caterer needed extra money because she'd upgraded from the standard package to the premium menu. Each change came with the same casual assumption that I would simply accommodate whatever she wanted. No consultation about budget impacts. No discussion about whether these upgrades were necessary. No recognition that every dollar she was adding represented hours of my life spent in operating rooms dealing with trauma cases, making life-and-death decisions. The breaking point should have been when she called me at the hospital during a particularly difficult surgery day to complain that the wedding dress shop wanted a larger deposit than expected. I was literally between patients, exhausted from a 12-hour shift, and she was upset because her dress was going to cost $4,000 instead of $3,000. Can't you just call them and put it on your credit card? She asked impatiently. I need to finalize this today so they can start the alterations. I'm at work, I said. I'm saving someone's life right now. Can this wait a few hours? Well, obviously your work is important, she replied with an edge to her voice. But this dress situation is time-sensitive, and it's not like I'm asking you to do anything complicated. Just make a phone call. The bills started arriving like a tsunami. Each envelope contained another financial surprise that my sister had somehow forgotten to mention during our initial budget discussion. The venue required additional insurance. $800. The band needed a sound system upgrade, $1,200. The photographer wanted an assistant for the extended coverage my sister had requested. Another $1,000. Every few days brought a new emergency that required immediate payment. The cake designer needed premium ingredients for the custom 5-tier design my sister had fallen in love with. The florist discovered that the imported orchids she'd insisted on were more expensive than originally quoted due to seasonal availability. The makeup artist required a trial run fee plus travel expenses for the early morning wedding day service. I found myself staying up late at night going through credit card statements and bank balances, trying to figure out how to manage the mounting expenses without completely destroying my own financial stability. The original $35,000 estimate had already ballooned to over $42,000, and we were still 6 weeks away from the actual wedding date. The most infuriating part was how these additional costs were presented to me. My sister never called herself. It was always my parents delivering the news with apologetic voices and stressed expressions. They'd clearly been designated as the messengers tasked with softening the blow of each new financial demand. "Sweetheart, there's been another small complication with the catering," Mom would say, her voice tight with anxiety. "The venue requires them to use specific serving equipment that costs extra, and your sister just found out about it today." Small complication. Small. We were talking about an additional $1,500 for serving equipment that any professional caterer should have included in their original quote. I started asking to see the actual contracts and invoices instead of just taking everyone's word about these surprise costs. What I discovered was even worse than I'd suspected. My sister wasn't just agreeing to expensive options. She was upgrading everything to the most luxurious level available, apparently operating under the assumption that since someone else was paying, price was no object. The flowers weren't just imported orchids. They were rare varieties flown in from 3 different countries. The photography wasn't just professional coverage. It was a premium package that included engagement photos, bridal portraits, same-day editing, and custom photo albums. The catering wasn't just dinner. It was a 7-course tasting menu with wine pairings and specialty cocktails. When I confronted my parents about these upgrades, they looked genuinely confused. "But Connor said he wanted her to have the best of everything," Dad explained. "He was very specific that money shouldn't be a limiting factor for their special day." "Connor isn't paying for any of this," I pointed out. "I am, and I never agreed to unlimited spending." "Well, no, but he's going to pay you back," Mom said weakly. "And in the meantime, wouldn't you want your sister to have a beautiful wedding? This is a once-in-a-lifetime event. A once-in-a-lifetime event that was costing more than many people's annual salaries." I was beginning to understand that Connor's promise to repay everything was just a convenient fiction that allowed everyone to pretend this wasn't really my money being spent. The worst part was my sister's complete detachment from the financial reality of what she was planning. When I tried to discuss the budget with her directly, she acted like I was being petty and controlling. "I don't understand why you're making this so complicated," she said during one particularly frustrating phone call. "Connor and I have already decided what kind of wedding we want. Your job is just to handle the payments until he can take over. Why are you trying to micromanage every little detail?" My job was to pay for her fantasy wedding while being excluded from any actual decision-making. I was the silent financial partner in a project I had no control over, watching my savings account drain away to fund someone else's vision of perfection. Meanwhile, Emma was asking why we couldn't afford the summer art camp she'd been excited about, and I was having to explain that Mommy had some unexpected expenses right now. I was canceling my own vacation plans, postponing necessary home repairs, and driving a car that needed significant maintenance because every available dollar was going toward my sister's wedding. 5 days before the wedding, I received a call that should have been the highlight of my professional month. Dr. Richardson from the trauma center had a personal emergency. His mother was having surgery in another state, and he needed someone to cover an extremely complex case. A multi-vehicle accident victim required immediate reconstructive surgery, the kind of challenging procedure that could add $15,000 to my quarterly income. The surgery was scheduled for the next morning and would likely run 8 to 10 hours. It was exactly the kind of case I'd built my reputation on, the type of work that reminded me why I'd chosen this profession in the first place. More importantly, the additional income would help offset some of the financial stress from the wedding expenses. There was just one problem. Emma had a school holiday that day, and my regular babysitter was unavailable. My backup childcare options had all fallen through due to short notice. I was looking at a professional opportunity worth thousands of dollars, and I couldn't take it because I had no one to watch my 8-year-old daughter for one day. I went through my entire contact list. My neighbor was out of town. My colleague, who sometimes helped with childcare emergencies, was working her own surgery that day. The daycare center Emma usually attended was closed for maintenance. I was running out of options fast. That's when I made the call I should never have had to make. I called my sister, the woman whose wedding I was financing completely, whose every whim I'd been accommodating for months, whose lifestyle I'd been subsidizing for years. I called her and asked for one favor. Could she spend one day watching her niece so I could work a case that would help recover some of the money I was spending on her wedding? "Hi, it's me," I said when she answered. "I have an emergency situation and I really need your help." "What kind of emergency?" she asked immediately, sounding suspicious, as if I was about to ask her to do something unreasonable. I explained the situation. The important surgery, the financial opportunity, Emma needing supervision for just one day while she was off school. I kept my tone calm and matter-of-fact, treating it like the simple favor it should have been between sisters. The silence on the other end of the phone stretched long enough that I thought we might have been disconnected. "You want me to babysit Emma?" she finally said, her voice carrying a tone I couldn't quite identify. "Just for the day," I confirmed. "You could take her to lunch, maybe go to the park, watch some movies. She's 8 years old. She's not difficult to manage, and it would really help me out professionally." Another pause. Then, "Alexandra, I can't believe you're asking me this right now. Do you have any idea how stressed I am about the wedding? I have final dress fittings, last-minute vendor confirmations, and Connor is flying in tomorrow night. The last thing I need is to spend my day playing babysitter to your kid." "Your kid." She referred to Emma as your kid, as if her niece was some stranger's responsibility rather than family. "It's just for one day," I repeated, trying to keep the frustration out of my voice. "And it's a really important case for me professionally. The extra income would actually help with some of the wedding expenses." "Look," she said with a sigh, "I'm sorry you're having childcare issues, but that's not really my problem. You chose to have a child. You chose to be a single mother, and you chose to take on these demanding work situations. I didn't sign up to be your backup babysitter just because your planning fell through." I felt something cold settle in my chest, but I tried one more approach. "I understand you're busy with wedding preparations, but this is really important to me. I've been working extra cases to help cover the wedding costs, and this would make a significant difference financially." "That's exactly my point," she said, her voice getting sharper. "You're always talking about money and work like they're the most important things in the world. Maybe if you had better work-life balance, you wouldn't be in these kinds of situations." Work-life balance. The woman who hadn't worked a day in 3 years was lecturing me about work-life balance. "Besides," she continued, "it's not like this surgery is life or death, right? Can't someone else do it? Why does it have to be you?" That question revealed everything I needed to know about how my sister viewed my career. To her, my work as a trauma surgeon was just a job, something I could easily reschedule or delegate when it became inconvenient. She had no understanding that this was someone's life I was talking about, that surgical opportunities like this didn't come around often, and that my professional reputation was built on being the person other doctors called when cases were too complex for anyone else. It has to be me because I'm one of the few surgeons in the region qualified to handle this type of reconstruction, I explained. And yes, it could very well be life or death depending on how the surgery goes. Well, I'm sorry, but I can't help you. I have my own responsibilities right now. Her own responsibilities. Planning her wedding. The wedding I was paying for. The wedding that existed only because I was sacrificing my own financial security to make her dreams come true. And she couldn't watch her niece for 8 hours, so I could work a case that would help me afford her fairy tale. What responsibilities exactly? I asked, my patience finally wearing thin. Excuse me? Her voice turned ice cold. What responsibilities do you have that are more important than helping your sister with a work emergency? You don't have a job. Connor isn't even in town yet, and every vendor for your wedding has already been paid and confirmed. What exactly are you doing tomorrow that's so crucial you can't help your niece and your sister? The explosion was immediate. How dare you talk to me like that? Just because you're paying for some things doesn't mean you get to judge how I spend my time or act like you're better than me. I'm not your employee, Alexandra. I'm not your maid. And I'm certainly not your personal babysitter just because you can't manage your own life properly. Not your maid, not your employee. These were the words that ended everything, though I didn't realize it in that moment. I was too shocked by the sheer audacity of what she just said. Here I was funding her entire wedding, and she was acting like I was the one being unreasonable for asking for help. Fine, I said quietly. I understand. You can't help me. Good. I'm glad you finally get it. I hung up the phone and sat in my kitchen for a long time, staring at nothing. Then I called Dr. Richardson and told him I couldn't take the case. $15,000 gone because my sister couldn't be bothered to spend one day with her niece. After I hung up the phone, something fundamental shifted inside me. I sat at my kitchen table for nearly an hour, replaying the conversation and really hearing my sister's words for the first time. I'm not your maid. I'm not your employee. That's not my problem. The irony was so complete it was almost laughable. She wasn't my employee, but I was apparently hers. She wasn't my maid, but I was expected to clean up every financial mess and solve every problem she created. Her childcare emergency wasn't her problem, but my wedding expenses were definitely my responsibility. I pulled out my laptop and started going through the wedding vendor contracts I'd been paying. Every single invoice, every deposit receipt, every payment confirmation. The total had reached $47,000. $47,000 for one day for someone who couldn't spare 8 hours to help me with a work emergency. But it wasn't really about the money anymore. It was about the casual cruelty of her response, the complete absence of any recognition that I'd been sacrificing for months to make her dreams possible. When I needed her for the first time, not for money, not for some huge favor, just for basic family support. She'd responded like I was imposing on her generosity rather than asking for help from someone who owed me everything. I thought about Emma, who would have to spend tomorrow at the hospital with me instead of having a fun day off from school because her aunt couldn't be bothered. I thought about the patient who might not get the best possible surgical care because I'd have to turn down the case. I thought about all the times I'd rearranged my schedule, canceled my plans, and put my own life on hold to accommodate my family's needs. And then I thought about my sister, probably planning her nail appointment or shopping for honeymoon clothes, completely unbothered by the fact that she just refused to help the person who was making her wedding possible. That's when I made the decision that changed everything. I picked up my phone and started making calls. First, to the venue. I need to cancel the Morrison wedding scheduled for this Saturday. The coordinator was confused, asking about penalties and whether we wanted to reschedule. No, I said calmly. Complete cancellation. The person responsible for payment is no longer available to cover the costs. Next, the caterer. Same conversation, same result. Then the photographer, the florist, the band, the cake designer. One by one, I systematically canceled every single vendor contract for my sister's wedding. Ma'am, are you sure about this? The florist asked. We've already prepared most of the arrangements. The cancellation fee alone will be substantial. I'm sure, I replied, and I'll accept responsibility for any cancellation fees that are legitimately owed, but no additional services should be provided. The most satisfying call was to the dress shop. My sister's $4,000 gown was ready for final pickup, but since I was the one who'd put the deposit on my credit card, I had the authority to cancel that too. The customer will be very upset, the seamstress warned me. She's been so excited about this dress, and the alterations are perfect. The customer should have thought about that before she decided that family obligations don't apply to her, I said. Each phone call felt like lifting a weight off my shoulders. With every vendor I canceled, I felt more clarity about what I was doing and why it was absolutely the right decision. This wasn't spite or revenge. This was setting a boundary that should have been set months ago. By the time I'd finished calling every vendor, it was nearly midnight. My phone had been buzzing with texts from my parents. My sister had apparently called them in a panic when the venue contacted her about the cancellation, but I wasn't ready to deal with their calls yet. First, I needed to make sure Emma was taken care of tomorrow. I called my colleague, Dr. Martinez, explained the situation, and asked if her teenage daughter could watch Emma during the surgery. She agreed immediately, mentioning that her daughter needed some extra spending money. Anyway, problem solved with help from someone who actually understood what family support looked like. Then I called Dr. Richardson back. I've resolved my childcare situation, I told him. I can take the case tomorrow after all. Are you sure? He asked. I know this was complicated for you. I'm absolutely sure, I said. In fact, I've never been more sure of anything in my life. I woke up the next morning with a sense of peace I hadn't felt in months. For the first time since this wedding planning nightmare began, I wasn't thinking about vendor deadlines, payment schedules, or my sister's endless list of demands. Instead, I was focused on what actually mattered, preparing for a complex surgery that could save someone's life. Emma was excited about spending the day with Dr. Martinez's daughter, Sophia, who had promised to take her to the Science Museum and teach her some Spanish. As I dropped Emma off that morning, I realized this was what real family support looked like. People helping each other without keeping score, without making the person asking for help feel like a burden. The surgery went even better than expected. The patient was a 22-year-old college student who'd been in a devastating car accident, and the reconstructive work I was able to do would likely restore full function to his damaged hand. These were the moments that reminded me why I'd chosen medicine. The opportunity to use my skills to genuinely change someone's life for the better. During my lunch break, I checked my phone for the first time all day. 53 missed calls and over 100 text messages. The wedding was supposed to be tomorrow, and apparently word had gotten out about the cancellations. My sister had called me 17 times since 6 o'clock in the morning. My parents had called repeatedly. Even some of the wedding vendors had called, probably hoping to understand what was happening and whether there was any chance of salvaging their contracts. But I wasn't ready to deal with the chaos yet. I was in the middle of something important, something that actually mattered. So, I put my phone back in my locker and returned to the operating room. The surgery lasted 9 hours total, and by the time I emerged, I was exhausted but satisfied. We'd successfully reconstructed the damaged tissue, and the patient's prognosis was excellent. This was what I was meant to be doing with my time. Saving lives, not funding fantasy weddings for people who couldn't spare a day to help me in return. When I finally retrieved my phone that evening, the missed call count had reached into the triple digits. My voicemail was completely full. The text messages ranged from confused to angry to borderline hysterical. From my mother, Alexandra, please call us immediately. There's been some terrible mistake with the wedding vendors. We need to fix this right away. From my father, sweetheart, I don't understand what happened, but we need to talk. Your sister is beside herself. From my sister, call me right now. I don't know what game you think you're playing, but you need to fix this immediately. The wedding is tomorrow. Tomorrow. You can't just destroy months of planning because you're having some kind of breakdown. Game. She thought this was a game. She thought I'd canceled her entire wedding as some kind of joke or manipulation tactic, not as a direct response to her complete lack of consideration for me and my daughter. The most telling messages were the ones from later in the day after my sister had apparently tried to reinstate the vendor contracts herself. Several vendors had called to confirm that they couldn't provide services without payment, and my sister had learned that Connor's promised financial resources were somehow still unavailable. The venue is asking for full payment upfront to reinstate the contract. One of her messages read, Connor's money is still tied up, so you need to call them back and straighten this out. They're being completely unreasonable about this. Unreasonable. A business expecting payment for services was being unreasonable. But a sister refusing to watch her niece for one day wasn't unreasonable at all. I drove home slowly, taking time to process everything that had happened. This morning, I'd been trapped in a situation where I was expected to provide unlimited financial support while receiving no consideration in return. Tonight, I was free from that trap. The wedding was canceled, the vendors were canceled, and my sister was finally facing the reality of what her dreams actually cost. The most liberating part was realizing that I didn't feel guilty. I tried to be the supportive sister, the reliable daughter, the family problem solver. I'd given thousands of dollars, hundreds of hours, and countless compromises. And when I'd asked for one small favor in return, I'd been treated like I was being unreasonable and demanding. Well, if I was going to be called unreasonable anyway, I might as well actually be unreasonable. If I was going to be accused of controlling behavior, I might as well actually exercise some control, starting with control over my own money and my own boundaries. I walked into my apartment that evening to find my landline answering machine blinking with the maximum number of messages it could hold. My cell phone had finally stopped buzzing only because the battery had died during surgery. When I plugged it in to charge, it immediately came back to life with a stream of notifications that seemed to go on forever. The messages told the story of a day that had apparently descended into complete chaos. It started with confusion, my parents calling to ask if there had been some kind of mistake with the vendor cancellations. Then came panic as my sister realized this wasn't an error but a deliberate action. Finally came desperation as they all realized that the wedding was scheduled to happen in 18 hours and every essential vendor had been canceled. Alexandra, this is your mother. I don't understand what's happening, but people are saying the wedding is canceled. Please call me back immediately so we can sort this out. It's Dad. Your sister is crying hysterically. She says you canceled everything for her wedding. That can't be true. Please call us so we can figure out what really happened. Alexandra, it's me. My sister's voice was tight with barely controlled rage. I don't know what you think you're doing, but you need to call every single vendor back and fix this mess. The wedding is tomorrow. Tomorrow. You can't just destroy months of planning because you're having some kind of breakdown. The messages progressed through the day, becoming increasingly frantic as my family realized that most vendors wouldn't reinstate canceled contracts without full payment upfront. Payment that neither my sister nor Connor could apparently provide. The florist wants $4,000 in cash to provide the arrangements tomorrow. My sister's voice was shaking now. The photographer won't even take our calls. The caterer says they've already booked another event for tomorrow night. You need to fix this right now. But the most interesting messages were the ones that revealed what was happening with Connor. Around message 37, the tone shifted from anger to confusion to something approaching panic. Connor's business partners are saying they can't release his funds until Monday. My sister's voice was smaller now, less certain. But that doesn't matter because you're going to call the vendors back anyway, right? You're not actually going to let my wedding be destroyed over one stupid babysitting request. One stupid babysitting request. Even in crisis mode, she couldn't acknowledge that refusing to help with Emma had been wrong. Even facing the complete collapse of her wedding day, she was still characterizing my request as unreasonable. Message 43 was from my mother. Sweetheart, we've been trying to reach Connor all day to see if he can resolve the payment issues with the vendors, but he's not answering his phone. Your sister says he's in important business meetings, but this is becoming very concerning. By message 50, even my father sounded worried. Alexandra, I think we need to have a serious family conversation about everything that's been happening. There are some things about this wedding situation that aren't adding up, and we need to figure out what's really going on. The final message on my answering machine was from my sister, recorded just an hour before I got home. I've been calling you for 12 hours. 12 hours. Do you understand that my wedding is tomorrow and I have no venue, no food, No flowers? No music? Guests are already traveling here. People have taken time off work, bought gifts, made arrangements. You can't just destroy all of that because you're mad at me. But it was the text messages that really told the story of how the day had unfolded. My sister had apparently spent hours trying to reinstate vendor contracts herself, only to discover that the wedding industry doesn't work that way. You can't cancel everything and then expect to reinstate it 24 hours later without consequences. Some vendors were willing to work with her, but only with full payment upfront and significant penalty fees. Others had already committed their services to other events. The dress shop informed her that while the gown was still available, it would cost an additional $1,500 to rush the final alterations for pickup tomorrow. Most telling were the texts about Connor's mysterious absence during this crisis. My sister had been calling and texting him frantically all day, but he wasn't responding to her attempts to reach him. His business partners claimed he was in emergency meetings that couldn't be interrupted, even for a wedding emergency. Connor finally called back. One of her texts read, "He's devastated about everything, and he's trying to liquidate some assets to cover the vendor costs. But it might take a few days to get the money together." A few days. The wedding was tomorrow, and Connor needed a few days to get money together. Either he wasn't nearly as wealthy as he'd claimed, or he was remarkably bad at managing his finances during emergencies. I finally returned my parents' calls that evening, but I was calm and resolved in a way that seemed to unnerve them more than if I'd been angry or emotional. They'd clearly expected me to be apologetic, ready to fix the situation and restore the wedding plans. Instead, they found someone who had thought everything through and wasn't changing her mind. "Alexandra, thank God," Mom said when she answered. "We've been worried sick. What happened with all the vendors? How do we fix this?" "There's nothing to fix," I said simply. "I canceled the wedding because I'm no longer willing to pay for it." The silence stretched long enough that I wondered if the call had dropped. Finally, Dad's voice came on. They'd put me on speakerphone. "Sweetheart, we know you're upset about the babysitting situation, but canceling the entire wedding seems extreme." "It's not about babysitting," I explained. "It's about the fact that I've been financing my sister's lifestyle for years, and when I needed one small favor in return, she told me it wasn't her problem. That made me realize this entire arrangement isn't working for anyone." "But the guests," Mom protested. "People have traveled from out of state. Your sister is devastated. Surely we can work something out." "Where's Connor in all this?" I asked. "Where's the man who promised to pay me back with interest? Where's the successful businessman who insisted money was no object for his bride?" Another long pause. I could hear whispered conversation in the background before Dad came back on the line. "Connor's been trying to access his funds all day, but there are some complications with his business accounts." "What kind of complications exactly?" "Well," Mom's voice was hesitant. "It seems like his money is tied up in some kind of legal issue. Something about an investigation into his business practices." The pieces clicked into place immediately. Connor wasn't having cash flow problems. He was under investigation. The mysterious travel, the vague business descriptions, the inability to meet family members, the sudden financial difficulties right before the wedding. My sister had gotten engaged to someone who was likely involved in something illegal. "Has my sister been told about this investigation?" I asked. "We're not entirely sure what to tell her," Dad said. "Connor asked us not to worry her with the details while he's trying to resolve everything." "Where is Connor right now?" We don't actually know," Mom said quietly. "He was supposed to fly in tonight for the rehearsal dinner, but his flight was canceled or delayed or something. Your sister has been trying to reach him all evening." I felt a strange combination of vindication and sadness. Vindication that my instincts about Connor had been correct, but sadness that my sister was about to learn some very hard truths about the man she thought she was marrying. "You need to tell my sister everything you know about Connor's situation," I said. "She deserves to know what she's really dealing with. But if we tell her, it might ruin everything." Mom protested. "Mom, everything is already ruined. The wedding is canceled, Connor is missing, and apparently, he's under criminal investigation." My sister needs to face reality, not live in a fantasy that's being funded by other people's money. The next morning, I woke up to find my phone surprisingly quiet. Only 3 missed calls overnight, compared to the dozens from the day before. When I checked my messages, I found out why. Connor had disappeared completely. His phone was going straight to voicemail, his business contacts claimed they didn't know where he was, and his hotel reservation for the wedding weekend had been canceled. My sister had spent the night calling hospitals and police stations, thinking something terrible had happened to him. It wasn't until Sunday afternoon that the truth came out. Connor hadn't been in an accident or detained by business emergencies. He'd fled the state when he realized my family didn't actually have money to support his lifestyle or cover his legal problems. A mutual acquaintance finally revealed that Connor had been running elaborate cons on women he met through dating apps, convincing them to support him financially while he fought various legal battles. My sister had been his mark, not his fiancée. The engagement ring was fake, the promises of repayment were lies, and the entire relationship had been designed to extract as much money as possible from my family before he moved on to his next victim. 6 months later, I've rebuilt my relationship with my parents, who finally understood the impossible position they'd put me in for years. My sister moved to another city to start over, humiliated by the realization that she'd been completely fooled by Connor's scam. She sent me a letter of apology eventually, acknowledging that she'd taken my support for granted and treated me unfairly. Emma and I are thriving. Without the constant financial drain of supporting my extended family's unrealistic expectations, I've been able to save for her college fund, take the vacation we'd postponed, and even consider buying a larger house. More importantly, I've learned to value my own time and resources, and to set boundaries that protect both my daughter and myself. The $15,000 I earned from that emergency surgery went into Emma's education fund. And every time I face a difficult decision about family obligations, I remember how it felt to finally say no to demands that weren't reasonable, and how much peace came from prioritizing the people who actually deserved my support. Now on to the next story. Story 2. My sister made my life a living hell and is now pregnant with my husband's child. But when our parents cut her out of the will, she begged me for help. I'm going to tell you something that might sound familiar, but I promise the ending will surprise you. My name is Maya, and for most of my life, I believed I was the problem in my family. You know how some families have that one kid who can do no wrong? Well, that was my younger sister, Lily, and I was the one who apparently could do nothing right. Looking back now, I can see how twisted everything really was. But when you're living it, when it's your normal, you don't question why your parents light up when one daughter walks into the room and barely acknowledge the other. Lily was born when I was 7, and from day one, she was treated like a precious miracle. Maybe it was because she was the baby, or maybe because she had these big green eyes and blonde curls that made strangers stop my mother on the street to compliment her beautiful daughter. Me? I had boring brown hair and brown eyes, and I was always too serious, too independent, too much of everything that apparently wasn't charming. While I spent my afternoons doing homework at the kitchen table, Lily would curl up on Dad's lap watching cartoons. While I helped Mom with dishes, Lily would be getting her nails painted or having her hair braided. I learned early that love in our house was conditional and scarce, so I decided to earn it through achievement. I became the responsible one, the straight-A student, the daughter who never asked for anything because I knew the answer would probably be no anyway. Lily became the princess who only had to bat her eyelashes to get whatever she wanted. Maya, why can't you be more like your sister? Mom would say when I'd express any need or want. Lily is so sweet and easygoing. Sweet, that's what they all thought. But even at 7 years old, I could see something in Lily's eyes when adults weren't looking. Something cold and calculating that made my stomach twist with an anxiety I couldn't name yet. By the time she was 5 and I was 12, the dynamic was set in stone. She was the golden child, and I was the reliable one who existed to make everyone else's life easier. I told myself it was fine. I told myself I didn't need their approval. But deep down, that little girl in me kept wondering what I had done wrong to deserve so little of my parents' love and why my sister seemed to get so much without even trying. I had no idea that the worst was yet to come, or that this favoritism would eventually create a monster who would try to destroy everything I'd worked so hard to build. The signs were all there from the beginning, but nobody wanted to see them. Not even me. The first time I realized Lily wasn't the sweet angel everyone believed her to be. I was 13 and she was 6. I came home from school to find my diary ripped apart, pages scattered across my bedroom floor like confetti. When I ran crying to Mom, Lily was right behind me with crocodile tears, claiming she'd been looking for crayons and accidentally knocked it off my desk. "I'm sorry, Maya," she wailed, throwing her arms around Mom's legs. "I didn't mean to." Mom melted instantly, scooping Lily up and shooting me a disapproving look. "It's just a diary, Maya. Don't make such a big deal about it. She's just a little girl." But I had seen Lily's face for just a split second before she started crying. She'd been smiling, actually smiling. That's when the real torment began. She'd go through my backpack when I wasn't looking, sometimes taking my homework or throwing away my lunch. When I'd complain, she'd deny it with such convincing innocence that even I started doubting myself. "Maybe you forgot to pack it," Mom would suggest. "You're getting so absent-minded lately." The food sabotage was particularly cruel. Lily discovered I was lactose intolerant before I did, slipping milk into my orange juice or cheese into my sandwiches, then watching with fascination as I double over with stomach cramps. "Poor Maya is sick again," she'd announce to anyone who'd listen, her voice dripping with fake concern. My belongings became casualties in her war against me. My favorite sweater would mysteriously develop holes. My books would go missing right before important tests. My alarm clock would be unplugged so I'd oversleep and get in trouble. Every single incident had an explanation that made Lily look innocent and me look careless. The worst part was how she'd weaponize other kids against me. She had this gift for manipulation that was terrifying in someone so young. She'd tell kids at school that I said mean things about them, or she'd share embarrassing stories about me that she'd overheard at home. Soon, I found myself friendless and isolated with a reputation as the weird girl with family problems. "Why don't you have any friends over anymore?" Dad asked one day. I wanted to scream that it was because his precious daughter had systematically destroyed every potential friendship I'd tried to build. Instead, I just shrugged and said, "I prefer studying." "See," Mom said, like this proved something. "Maya's always been antisocial. Lily makes friends everywhere she goes." Of course she did. But at home, when it was just us, she'd corner me and whisper things that made my blood run cold. "Nobody likes you," she'd say with that sweet smile. "Mom and Dad wish I was their only daughter." I'll never forget the smell of burning hair and the look of pure hatred in my sister's eyes the day everything changed forever. I was 15, Lily was 8, and I was getting ready for my first real date. Tommy Rodriguez had finally asked me to the school dance. And for the first time in years, I felt genuinely happy about something. I'd saved up my babysitting money to buy a dress, and I was curling my hair in the bathroom, humming softly to myself. That's when Lily appeared in the doorway holding Dad's lighter. "You look stupid," she said, her voice flat and cold. "Tommy's going to laugh at you." I ignored her, focusing on my reflection. I'd learned that engaging with her only made things worse. But ignoring her was apparently the wrong choice, too, because the next thing I knew, she'd lunged forward and flicked the lighter right near my hair. The flame caught the ends of my curls instantly. I screamed and jumped back, frantically patting at my hair while the acrid smell filled the bathroom. In the mirror, I could see a chunk of my hair was singed off, leaving an uneven, burned mess on the right side of my head. "Lily!" I shrieked, but she was already running down the hallway, shouting, "Daddy!" Maya's yelling at me again. But this time, Dad had heard my scream. This time he came running and found me standing in the bathroom with burned hair and tears streaming down my face, holding the evidence. His lighter that definitely hadn't been in the bathroom before. "What happened?" he demanded, looking between us. "She tried to set my hair on fire," I said, my voice shaking. Lily immediately burst into tears. "I didn't mean to. I was just playing." She grabbed the lighter from me and it went too close. "I'm sorry. I'm sorry." For a moment, I thought this would be like all the other times. I thought Dad would comfort her and tell me not to be so dramatic. But something in his face was different. Maybe it was the smell of burned hair that couldn't be denied. Maybe it was the way I was trembling. Maybe it was finally seeing physical evidence of what his younger daughter was capable of. "Lily," he said quietly, and his voice had an edge I'd never heard before. "Tell me exactly what happened." "I already did," she wailed, but her crying sounded different now, desperate instead of manipulative. Dad looked at the lighter in my hand, then at my burned hair, then at Lily's face. For the first time in my life, I saw doubt creep into his expression when he looked at his golden child. "This stops now," he said, and I wasn't sure if he was talking to her or to himself. "Lily, go to your room. We'll discuss this after I take care of your sister." Dad kept his word. Within a week, I was enrolled in a kickboxing class at Morrison's Martial Arts Academy downtown. At first, I was terrified and awkward, the only teenage girl in a class full of confident adults who seemed to know exactly what they were doing. But something magical happened after about a month. My body started remembering what it felt like to be strong. My mind began to quiet the constant anxiety that had become my default state. For the first time in years, I had somewhere to channel all the anger and frustration I'd been carrying around. Sensei Kim became like a second father to me. He was this quietly intense man who never raised his voice but commanded complete respect from everyone in the room. He taught me that strength wasn't about being the biggest or the loudest. It was about being centered, confident, and unafraid. "Power comes from within," he'd say during our meditation sessions. "Nobody can take it from you unless you let them." At home, the dynamic was shifting. Lily couldn't figure out why her usual tactics weren't working on me anymore. When she'd try to corner me with her whispered threats, I'd look her straight in the eye with a calmness that clearly unnerved her. The real test came 3 months into my training. I was in my room doing homework when I heard her rifling through my backpack in the hallway. This was nothing new. She'd been stealing my lunch money for years, and I'd learned to hide most of my cash in different places. But that day, she found my emergency $20 bill, the one I kept for genuine emergencies. "Give it back, Lily," I said from my doorway, my voice steady and calm. She looked up at me with that familiar defiant smirk, crumpling the bill in her fist. "Make me." For 8 years, I'd walked away from moments like this. I'd complained to parents who didn't listen, tried to reason with someone who had no interest in reason, and ultimately just accepted that I was powerless against her. But something was different now. I could feel the strength in my legs, the control in my breathing, the quiet confidence that months of training had built in me. "I'm asking you nicely one more time," I said. "Give me back my money." "Or what?" she taunted, taking a step closer. "You'll cry to Daddy again?" She reached out to shove me like she'd done 100 times before, but this time I was ready. I caught her wrist gently but firmly, applying just enough pressure to stop her movement without hurting her. The look of shock on her face was priceless. For the first time in her life, someone had physically stopped her from doing exactly what she wanted. "I don't want to hurt you," I said quietly, "but I'm not going to let you hurt me anymore either." When Lily couldn't physically intimidate me anymore, she adapted her strategy like a predator learning new hunting techniques. The direct attacks stopped, but they were replaced by something much more insidious. A cold, calculated campaign designed to make me feel invisible and worthless in my own home. She'd give me the silent treatment for weeks at a time, acting like I simply didn't exist. When forced to acknowledge my presence, she'd use this tone of voice that somehow managed to convey complete disgust, without actually saying anything offensive enough for our parents to notice. "Could you pass the salt?" she'd ask at dinner, but the way she said it made it sound like I was some kind of contamination she was forced to interact with. She became a master of backhanded compliments delivered in front of our parents. "Maya's so lucky she doesn't care about how she looks," she'd say sweetly. "I wish I could be that confident about being plain." Mom would laugh and ruffle Lily's hair. "You're terrible," she'd say fondly, like it was cute instead of cruel. But here's the thing about bullies who can't break you anymore. They start losing their power, and that desperation becomes obvious to everyone around them. I was done reacting to her provocations, done trying to defend myself, done caring whether she liked me or not. Instead, I threw myself into my studies with a focus that surprised even me. I joined the debate team, volunteered at the local library, and spent my evenings working on scholarship applications. Every hour I spent building my future was an hour I didn't have to spend thinking about my toxic home life. My junior year, Mrs. Patterson, my guidance counselor, called me into her office with news that would change everything. "Maya, I have something exciting to tell you," she said, barely containing her enthusiasm. "You've been awarded the Harrison Academic Scholarship to State University. Full tuition, room and board, plus a stipend for books." I stared at her, not quite processing what she was saying. "Full scholarship? Full ride," she confirmed. 4 years completely paid for as long as you maintain a 3.5 GPA. "Maya, this scholarship is incredibly competitive. They only give out 3 per year in the entire state." That night at dinner, I shared the news with my family. Dad's face lit up with genuine pride. "Maya, that's incredible. I'm so proud of you." Mom seemed pleased but distracted. "That's wonderful, honey. Will you still be able to come home on weekends to help with things around here?" But it was Lily's reaction that told me everything I needed to know. For just a moment, her carefully constructed mask slipped, and I saw pure rage flash across her face. Not disappointment or sadness that I'd be leaving. Rage that I was succeeding. In 8 months, I'd be free. College was like stepping into an alternate universe where I could reinvent myself completely. Nobody at State University knew about my complicated family dynamics or my years of being the family scapegoat. For the first time in my life, I could just be Maya. I threw myself into campus life with the enthusiasm of someone making up for lost time. I joined the photography club, volunteered at the campus women's center, and actually made friends, real friends who enjoyed my company and sought me out just because they liked being around me. It was during my sophomore year that I met James at a study group for advanced statistics. He was this quiet, thoughtful guy majoring in engineering with kind eyes and a smile that made my stomach flutter every time he looked at me. What struck me most was how genuinely interested he seemed in what I had to say. Our first date was to a tiny coffee shop off campus where we talked for 4 hours straight about everything and nothing. He told me about growing up as the middle child in a family of 5 kids, about his dream to design sustainable housing, about his fear of heights despite wanting to build skyscrapers. I found myself opening up to him in ways I'd never done with anyone. I told him about my scholarship, my love for photography, my complicated relationship with my family, though I kept the worst details to myself. Some stories were too heavy for second dates. "You're different from other girls I've known," he said as he walked me back to my dorm. "You're so independent and strong. Like you know exactly who you are." James and I became inseparable over the next few months. He was patient and gentle in ways I'd never experienced, treating me like I was precious instead of an inconvenience. When I told him about my martial arts training, he didn't seem intimidated. Instead, he asked if I'd teach him some basic moves. But life has a way of throwing curveballs when you least expect them. During spring semester of my junior year, I realized I was late. Not just a few days late, 2 weeks late, with symptoms I couldn't ignore anymore. The pregnancy test showed 2 pink lines that changed everything in an instant. I sat on my dorm room floor, staring at the test, feeling my carefully planned future crumbling around me. I'd worked so hard to escape my chaotic family life, to build something stable and predictable. And now this. When I told James, I watched his face go through every emotion. Shock, fear, worry, and finally, determination. "We'll figure this out," he said, taking my hands in his. "Whatever you want to do, we'll figure it out together." "I don't know what I want," I admitted. "I never planned for this to happen now." "I know," he said softly. "But Maya, I love you. I've been trying to work up the courage to tell you that for weeks. If you want to keep this baby, I want to do this with you. I want to marry you." The first betrayal happened when Emma was 6 months old. I found the text messages on James' phone completely by accident. I'd grabbed it instead of mine from the counter when Emma's pediatrician called, and the screen lit up with a notification that made my blood freeze. "Last night was incredible. When can I see you again? Rebecca." I stood there in our tiny kitchen holding our fussy baby while staring at words that shattered my world. Rebecca was a girl from his engineering program, someone he'd mentioned casually a few times as a study partner. When James came home that evening, I was sitting at our small dining table with his phone placed in the center like evidence in a courtroom. "We need to talk," I said, and something in my voice made him go completely pale. He didn't try to deny it. I have to give him credit for that. He sat down across from me, put his head in his hands, and told me everything. It had been going on for 3 weeks. He was stressed about money, about school, about being a father so young. And she'd been there offering an escape from all the responsibility. "It meant nothing," he said, tears streaming down his face. "Maya, I swear to you it meant absolutely nothing. I love you. I love Emma. I never wanted this to happen. I wanted to scream at him. I wanted to throw things. I wanted to take Emma and walk out that door and never look back. But I also knew that single parenthood would mean dropping out of school, giving up my career plans, possibly moving back home, back to the toxic environment I'd fought so hard to escape. So I made a choice that I'm still not sure was right or wrong. I chose to forgive him. "This never happens again," I said, my voice steady despite the earthquake happening in my chest. "Not ever. If you want to leave, leave now. But if you stay, you're choosing this family completely." He promised. He swore. He went to counseling. He deleted social media accounts and changed study groups and did everything right for the next 2 years until he didn't. Emma was almost 3 when I discovered the second affair. This time it was his supervisor at his new job, a woman 10 years older who'd been mentoring him. I found out when she called our house at midnight, drunk and crying, begging him to leave me for her. "Maya, I can explain," he said when I confronted him. But his explanations were starting to sound like rehearsed scripts. This time I was angrier, less willing to accept his remorse. "How am I supposed to trust you again? How am I supposed to believe anything you say?" "Because I'll prove it to you," he said desperately. "However long it takes. I'll prove that you and Emma are everything to me." Again I chose to stay. Again I chose to believe in rebuilding what we'd had. Maybe I was naive. Or maybe I was just terrified of being a single mother struggling to make ends meet. The confession came on a Tuesday night in March, 7 years into our marriage. While I was loading the dishwasher after Emma's bedtime, James had been acting strange for weeks. Distracted, guilty, jumping every time his phone rang. I'd started to wonder if we were headed for betrayal number 3. But I never could have prepared for what he actually told me. "Maya, we need to talk," he said. And those 4 words sent ice through my veins because I'd heard them before in this exact context. I dried my hands slowly, trying to prepare myself for another confession about another coworker or college friend. But when I turned around, James looked more destroyed than I'd ever seen him. "Sit down," he said. "Just tell me," I said. "Who is it this time?" The pause that followed lasted an eternity. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. "It's Lily." For a moment, my brain couldn't process what he'd said. "What do you mean it's Lily? Your sister?" "Maya, I'm so sorry. I never meant for this to happen. I never wanted to hurt you like this." The kitchen floor seemed to tilt beneath my feet. "You're having an affair with my sister?" "It started 6 months ago when she came to visit for Christmas," he said, words tumbling out like he'd been rehearsing this speech. "She was going through a hard time and we were just talking and somehow it just happened. 6 months. The number hit me like a physical blow. "You've been sleeping with my sister for 6 months? Maya, please let me explain." "6 months?" I repeated, sinking onto a kitchen chair. All those family dinners. All those times she hugged me and asked about Emma and acted like she cared about our family. She was sleeping with my husband. James was crying now. Ugly, desperate tears that I felt nothing for. "There's more," he whispered. I laughed. Actually laughed because what more could there possibly be? More? What more could there possibly be, James? "She's pregnant." The world stopped spinning. Everything went silent except for the hum of the refrigerator and the sound of my own heart breaking into pieces so small they'd never be put back together. "Pregnant," I repeated. We don't know. I mean, we're not sure if it's mine or what. My voice was deadly calm now, the same tone I'd used with Lily when I'd finally learned to fight back. She was seeing someone else around the same time. But Maya, the timing, it could be mine. I stared at this man I'd built my life around, the father of my daughter, the person I'd forgiven twice before for breaking my trust. And I realized that all of it, the apologies, the counseling, the promises, had been lies. He wasn't sorry he'd betrayed me. He was sorry he'd gotten caught. Get out, I said quietly. Took me 3 weeks to work up the courage to call my parents. 3 weeks of telling Emma that Daddy was on an extended business trip. 3 weeks of crying myself to sleep after she went to bed. 3 weeks of planning exactly how to handle the conversation that would change everything. I knew I had to be strategic about this. Lily had spent our entire lives manipulating situations to make herself look like the victim, and I couldn't just call up screaming accusations without proof. But I also knew her well enough to predict exactly how she'd react when confronted. So I set a trap. I called Mom on a Saturday afternoon when I knew Dad would be home too and asked them to put me on speakerphone for a family discussion. "Of course, sweetheart," Mom said. "Is everything okay? You sound stressed." "Actually, no. Everything isn't okay." I began carefully. "James and I are having some serious problems, and I need to talk to you about Lily's involvement." There was a pause. "Lily's involvement?" Dad asked. "What does Lily have to do with your marriage?" "Well, that's what I'm hoping you can help me understand," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "James told me that she's been calling him a lot lately, and Emma mentioned seeing her at our house when I wasn't there. I'm just trying to figure out what's going on." This was partially true. Emma had mentioned seeing Aunt Lily's car in our driveway one afternoon when she came home from school early, though at the time I'd assumed she was mistaken. "Oh, honey," Mom said with that dismissive tone I knew so well. "You know how Lily is. She probably just wanted to help with whatever problems you two were having. She's always cared so much about your happiness." "Right," I said. "That's why I thought maybe we should call her now and get her side of the story. Clear the air. Would you mind calling her and asking her to join this conversation?" "Of course," Dad said. "Hold on." I heard them conferencing Lily in, my heart pounding as I waited for her voice. "Maya?" she said, sounding surprised but not panicked. "Mom said you wanted to talk about James. Is everything okay?" "I'm hoping you can help me understand that," I replied. "James mentioned that you two have been talking a lot lately." "Well, yeah," she said, and I could practically hear her calculating her response. "He seemed really stressed about work and money, and I just wanted to help. I mean, you're my sister. Your happiness matters to me." "That's so sweet of you," I said, loading my voice with fake gratitude. "And it was really thoughtful of you to come by the house to check on Emma when I was working late." There was the tiniest pause. "Oh, yeah. I just wanted to make sure she was okay." "Of course. And James appreciated the support, I'm sure, especially during this difficult time with everything he's been dealing with." "What do you mean?" Lily asked, and now there was a slight edge to her voice. The aftermath of that phone call was swift and brutal. Dad hung up on Lily mid-sentence when she started blaming me for stealing James' affection in the first place. Within an hour, he'd called me back with a shakiness in his voice I'd never heard before. "Maya, I need you to know how sorry I am," he said. "For everything. For not protecting you when you were kids. For not seeing what she really was. For letting this happen to your family." The changes came faster than I expected. By the end of that week, my parents had consulted with their estate attorney and completely rewritten their will. Lily's inheritance, her trust fund, her emergency credit card access, everything was revoked. "We should have done this years ago," Mom admitted as we sat in my kitchen while Emma played in the backyard. "We enabled her behavior by always bailing her out, always making excuses. We created this monster." Meanwhile, I'd filed for divorce and demanded a paternity test as part of the proceedings. James' lawyer tried to argue that it was premature since the baby wasn't born yet, but my attorney was relentless. "We need to establish paternity for child support and custody purposes," she explained to the judge. My client has a right to know if her husband has fathered a child with her sister. The prenatal paternity test results came back 6 weeks later, and they confirmed what I'd already known in my heart. James was the father. Seeing it in black and white on the lab report felt like being stabbed all over again, but it also meant I could move forward with complete clarity. James tried to reach out several times during this period, sending long emails about how sorry he was and how he wanted to work things out. I forwarded them all to my lawyer without reading past the first few lines. There was nothing he could say that would change what he'd done or who he'd chosen to do it with. The divorce proceedings were messy but straightforward. James didn't fight me on custody. He'd have Emma every other weekend and 1 evening per week. He didn't fight me on the house. I'd keep it and refinance it in my name only. He didn't fight me on alimony. He'd pay it monthly until Emma turned 18. What he did fight me on was his relationship with Lily. "It's complicated, Maya," he said during one of our few face-to-face conversations at the lawyer's office. "She's carrying my child. I have to think about what's best for the baby." "What's best for the baby?" I replied coldly. "Is having a father who doesn't abandon his responsibilities when things get difficult. But based on your track record, I'm not holding my breath." Lily, meanwhile, was spiraling. With her financial safety net gone and her family relationships destroyed, she was facing the reality of single motherhood without the support system she'd always taken for granted. She'd been working part-time at a boutique, barely making enough to cover her rent. And now she was pregnant and essentially homeless. 3 months after James moved out, I got a text from him that I almost deleted without reading. "Lily had the baby. It's a boy. His name is Michael. I thought you should know." The call came 4 months after the divorce was finalized on a rainy Thursday evening while I was helping Emma with her homework. I didn't recognize the number, but something made me answer it anyway. "Maya." The voice was so broken and small that it took me a moment to realize it was Lily. "How did you get this number?" I got a new phone." "Maya, please don't hang up. I know you hate me and I know I deserve it, but I need to talk to you." I walked into the kitchen, out of Emma's earshot. "What do you want, Lily?" "I'm in trouble," she said, and I could hear crying in the background. A baby crying. Real trouble. "I got evicted last month. I'm staying at this horrible motel and I don't have money for another week. Michael is sick and I can't afford to take him to the doctor and I don't know what to do." I felt nothing. No sympathy, no sisterly concern, nothing but cold detachment. "That sounds difficult. Maya, please. I know I destroyed everything between us. I know I ruined your marriage and hurt you in the worst possible way, but I'm begging you. Not for me, but for Michael. He's innocent in all this. Is James helping you?" There was a bitter laugh. "James moved to Denver for a new job. He sends $300 a month in child support, which barely covers diapers and formula. He's seen Michael twice since he was born." "I see. Maya, I'm desperate. I've been calling Mom and Dad for weeks, but they won't even take my calls. I tried to go to their house, but they had the locks changed. I have no one left." The irony wasn't lost on me. Lily, who had spent her entire life destroying my relationships and undermining my happiness, was now alone and asking for help from the sister whose life she'd systematically ruined. "What exactly are you asking me for?" "Just a loan," she said quickly. "Enough to get into an apartment and pay the first month's rent. Maybe $2,000. I'll pay you back as soon as I get on my feet. I'm looking for work, but it's hard with the baby, and most places won't hire someone without a permanent address. $2,000. About half of what James paid me in monthly alimony. Money I could easily afford to give her. Money that would solve her immediate crisis. Please, Maya, I'm begging you. I know I don't deserve anything from you, but Michael does. He's your nephew. He's Emma's brother." "Half-brother," I corrected automatically. "Right, half-brother. But still family. Family. The word that had been used to excuse Lily's behavior for 24 years. Family, which apparently meant I was supposed to forgive anything and help anyone, no matter how much they'd hurt me. "Maya, are you still there?" "I'm here. So, will you help us? Just this once. I swear I'll never ask you for anything again. I thought about 7-year-old me finding my diary torn apart. I thought about 14-year-old me watching my sister smile as I doubled over in pain from the milk she'd secretly added to my food. I thought about 15-year-old me with my hair on fire and my sister holding the lighter. I thought about my wedding day and Lily hugging me and telling me how happy she was for me. I thought about Christmas dinner, Lily playing with Emma while planning to seduce my husband. I thought about 6 months of betrayal, 6 months of looking me in the eye and pretending to care about my family while she was actively destroying it. Maya, please, I'm not asking you to forgive me or have a relationship with me. I just need help getting back on my feet so I can take care of my son. No, I said quietly. What? No, I won't help you. I won't give you money. I won't co-sign an apartment lease. I won't provide references for jobs. I won't do anything to make your life easier. But Maya, you made your choices, Lily. You chose to pursue my husband. You chose to have an affair behind my back. You chose to get pregnant. You chose to destroy my marriage and break up Emma's family. Now you get to live with the consequences of those choices. I can't believe you're being this cruel. After everything we've been through. Everything we've been through? I interrupted. You mean everything you put me through? 24 years of psychological torture culminating in you sleeping with my husband and having his baby. That's what we've been through, Lily. I hung up and blocked the number immediately. The cycle was finally broken. 5 months later, I was sitting in my boss's office, accepting a promotion to regional marketing director with a 40% salary increase. Emma was thriving in her new school, making friends and excelling in her art classes. Our house felt like a home again instead of a crime scene. You've really turned things around this year, Patricia said as she handed me the promotion paperwork. Your campaign strategies have been innovative, and your leadership skills have impressed everyone on the executive team. That evening, I called Dad to share the news. Maya, that's wonderful. His voice was warm with genuine pride. You've worked so hard to rebuild your life. Your mother and I are so proud of how you've handled everything. We talked for an hour about Emma's school progress, my new job responsibilities, and their plans to visit for Thanksgiving. It felt good to have a normal relationship with my parents for the first time since childhood. I didn't ask about Lily, and Dad didn't offer any information. Later that week, I ran into Mrs. Gray from my old neighborhood at the grocery store. We'd always been friendly when James and I lived on Maple Street. Maya, how are you doing? I heard about the divorce. I'm so sorry. Thank you, Mrs. Gray. We're doing well. Actually, we're doing better than well. Good for you, she said, then lowered her voice conspiratorially. I don't know if you've heard, but your sister is living in those garden apartments on Oak Street now. The subsidized housing ones. I see her sometimes at the bus stop with a baby. She looks rough. I felt a flicker of something. Not quite satisfaction, but a sense of cosmic justice. I hope she's getting the help she needs, I said diplomatically. That night after Emma was asleep, I sat in my living room in my house, in my life that I'd built and rebuilt and finally reclaimed, and thought about how far I'd come. Lily was struggling in subsidized housing with a baby and no support system, facing the consequences of her choices for the first time in her life. James was alone in Denver, having lost his family for a few months of excitement with someone who turned out to be more trouble than she was worth. My parents were working to rebuild their relationship with me while mourning the daughter they thought they knew. And me? I was thriving. I had a career I loved, a daughter who was happy and secure, parents who finally saw me clearly. And most importantly, I had peace. Real peace, for the first time since childhood. Emma appeared in the living room doorway. Mom, are you happy now? She asked. The question caught me off guard. What do you mean, sweetheart? You seem different. Lighter, I guess. Like you're not worried all the time anymore. Yes, Emma. I am happy now. Happier than I've been in a long time. I'd learned that sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's simply refusing to let someone else's toxicity poison your life anymore. It's setting boundaries and enforcing them. It's choosing your own happiness over other people's manipulation. Lily had spent 24 years trying to destroy me, and in the end, she'd only succeeded in destroying herself. The little girl who had once wondered why she wasn't loved enough had grown into a woman who knew her own worth. That was the real victory. Now on to the next story. Story 3. I still remember the exact smell of that cheap cologne my dad always wore. Too sharp, too strong. Like he was trying to cover something up. Maybe he was. That day, it was all I could smell. Even in a room filled with flowers and nervous teenagers. I was standing by the window in the school auditorium, staring out at the parking lot, tugging at the cuffs of a suit that didn't fit me quite right. The shoulders were too tight and the sleeves barely brushed my wrists. It wasn't the tux we picked out last month. That one was midnight blue, custom-tailored with my initials stitched into the inner lining. This one was thrift store brown, wrinkled, loose in all the wrong places. I could already hear the whispers behind me, people noticing. I swallowed hard and tried not to let it get to me. My name's Lucas. I'm 18. I just graduated high school 2 weeks ago. And this is the story of how my dad tried to ruin one of the biggest moments of my life, and how he underestimated the wrong person. I've always been the quiet one. The kid who kept his head down, got decent grades, never made a scene. But there's something about getting pushed too far for too long that changes you. I think it started long before graduation, but that day was the tipping point. That was the day my grandma saw everything for what it really was. And once she did, things would never be the same. My dad's name is Mark. He's complicated, or at least that's what people say when they don't want to admit someone's just mean. He wasn't always like that. I think when I was younger, he used to ruffle my hair and call me champ. He'd toss a baseball around with me on Saturdays and pretend to let me win at video games. But somewhere along the way something changed. Maybe it was after my mom left. I was 9 when she packed her bags and walked out the door. She didn't even say goodbye to me. Just a quick hug, a kiss on the forehead, and then gone. I didn't know the full story back then. Just pieces of conversations behind closed doors. Something about control and broken trust. I figured it out as I got older. After she left, my dad started drinking more. Not the staggering around type, but the quiet kind. The kind where you come home and he's already 2 beers in, watching old war documentaries with the volume turned up way too loud. He stopped showing up to my school things, stopped asking about my day, and he started getting critical. Every little thing I did was wrong. My hair was too long. My clothes looked weird. My voice was too soft. "Man up, Lucas," he'd say whenever I hesitated. "You're not a kid anymore." The only person who ever really had my back was my grandma. His mom. Her name's Elaine, and she's the kind of old woman who wears bold lipstick, swears by homegrown tomatoes, and doesn't take nonsense from anybody. Not even her own son. She lived 2 hours away but called every weekend like clockwork. She'd drive up for my band concerts even when no one else did. She remembered all my favorite foods, all my favorite books. When I told her I wanted to go to art school, she didn't even blink, just nodded and said, "Then we'll make it happen." It was Grandma who insisted on getting me the tux. She'd saved up for months, and I knew it wasn't easy for her. She was retired, living off a modest pension. But she said, "Every boy deserves to feel like James Bond on his big day." We went together to the boutique, just the 2 of us. I'd never had anything custom fitted before. I remember stepping out of the changing room and seeing her eyes light up. She clapped her hands and said, "That's my handsome boy." I almost cried right there in the shop. A week before graduation, she called and said she'd be driving up the morning of the ceremony. I told her I'd be wearing the tux. She couldn't wait to see it. Except I wasn't. The morning of graduation, I came downstairs to find the tux missing. The garment bag that had been hanging in the hallway closet, gone. I checked my room, checked the laundry room, checked the trunk of the car. Nothing. I asked my dad casually at first, "Hey, have you seen my tux?" He didn't even look up from his phone, just muttered, "Probably left it somewhere." When I pressed, he shrugged and said, "Why do you need a tux anyway? It's just high school." I felt something twist in my chest. "Grandma bought that for me," I said. "She's driving all the way here to see me in it." That's when he looked up, smirked, and said, "It's just a suit, Lucas. Don't be so dramatic." I didn't understand, not yet. I thought maybe he'd misplaced it. Maybe he'd taken it to get cleaned. I wanted to believe that. I wanted to believe he wouldn't do something so petty, so cruel. But then, just before we left for the school, I saw the receipt on the kitchen counter. It was folded, like maybe he meant to throw it away and forgot. I opened it up. $125. Men's formal wear consignment. Blue tux, lightly worn. I stared at that receipt for a long time. My stomach dropped. My ears rang. I didn't say anything. I just folded it back up, tucked it in my pocket, and walked to the car. He didn't say a word either, just whistled along with the radio like it was any other day. By the time we got to the school, I felt like I was floating outside of myself. I posed for pictures with classmates who barely knew me, shook hands with teachers who'd probably forget my name by next week. And all the while, I kept tugging at the sleeves of that ugly brown suit, praying Grandma wouldn't notice. She arrived just before the ceremony started. I saw her coming across the lawn, holding her phone up to take pictures. She wore a blue floral dress and a wide-brimmed hat, the same one she wore to my 8th grade promotion. When she spotted me, she lit up, but then her face changed. She walked up, arms open, and hugged me tight. Then she pulled back, frowned a little, and touched my lapel. "Sweetheart, why are you wearing that old suit?" she asked gently. "Didn't we buy you a custom tux for graduation?" Before I could answer, my dad stepped in. He didn't miss a beat. "I sold it," he said, like he was commenting on the weather. Wouldn't have looked good on him anyway. I felt her body stiffen beside me. She looked at him, really looked at him, and I swear I saw something break in her eyes. She didn't speak. Not right away. Just stared at him like she was seeing him for the first time. Then slowly, she turned back to me. Her expression softened again. She reached up and brushed a piece of lint off my shoulder. "Well," she said quietly, "that's all right, Lucas. You still look like a young man worth celebrating." But the tension in the air was like ice. The ceremony itself was a blur. I heard my name called, walked across the stage, shook the principal's hand. I didn't hear the cheers or see the flash of cameras. My mind was stuck on that moment, on her face, on his smug tone, on the tux that should have been mine. After the ceremony, we went back to the house for a small get-together. My dad invited a few of his friends, guys I barely knew, loud and always joking about things I didn't find funny. Grandma came too, of course, bringing her famous lemon bars. She placed them carefully on the kitchen counter, then asked if she could talk to me outside for a minute. We sat on the back porch. The sun was starting to dip, casting everything in gold. She handed me a napkin-wrapped bar and watched me take a bite before she spoke. "Lucas," she said slowly, "did he really sell it?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. She nodded like she already knew, like she just wanted to hear it from me. "I thought so," she said. Then she looked out across the yard, her fingers tightening around the edge of her purse. "There's a lot I've let slide with him over the years. Too much. But not this. Not when it comes to you." And that's when everything started to change. But I didn't know how far she'd go or what she was about to set in motion. All I knew was that my dad had crossed a line and Grandma Elaine. She wasn't the type to let it go. My grandma stayed behind after the graduation party while I started cleaning up plates and wrapping leftover sandwiches in foil. I could hear muffled voices from the living room. Hers low and calm, his a little sharper, rising and falling like waves hitting rocks. I didn't catch all of it, but I caught enough. Words like disrespect, unacceptable, and not who I raised. Then his response, "Stay out of it, Mom. He's my kid." That hit me harder than I expected. My kid, not Lucas, not even your grandson. Just a possession, a thing, something he could toss around like the tux he sold for pocket change. When she finally left, she gave me a hug that lasted just a second longer than usual and whispered, "I'll fix this. I promise." I wanted to believe her, but part of me was already shutting down, packing everything into a tight little box in my chest where I could pretend it didn't hurt. But that box didn't stay shut for long. The days after graduation should have been the kind of quiet, satisfying break every student dreams of. No more tests, no more morning alarms, just late mornings, summer breezes, and college acceptance letters waiting to be opened. Instead, my dad started acting smug. Not in the usual way, either. There was this new edge to him, like he had won some sort of game and I didn't know the rules. He kept making offhand remarks about kids these days and entitled brats whenever I passed by. He even joked with one of his friends on the phone, loudly enough for me to hear, that he was doing the boy a favor teaching him life doesn't hand you things on a silver platter. That would have been ironic if it weren't so twisted, because my dad had always had the silver platter. His mom, my grandma, was the one who bailed him out of debt when he maxed out credit cards in his 30s. She was the one who helped him buy the house after my mom left and took half the savings. She paid the down payment. She bought the furniture. She even loaned him money to fix his truck when he refused to get a second job. And still, he acted like he was the victim of the universe, like the world owed him something. Meanwhile, I was working part-time at a bookstore 3 blocks from our house, saving up for college supplies. I didn't have a car, so I biked there in the mornings, even when it rained. My grandma had offered to help with tuition, but I told her I'd try to earn what I could. I didn't want to be another Mark in her life, someone who took and took without thinking twice. Then came the mail. It was a thick envelope with the university seal, my dream art school upstate. I opened it alone, sitting on the back steps with the sun on my neck and my heart in my throat. Accepted. Full ride. Merit scholarship, room and board included. I don't cry easily, but I came close. All I could think about was showing Grandma the letter, watching her eyes light up the same way they had in the tux shop. I didn't show it to my dad right away. I knew what he'd say. Probably something about how art degrees were useless or how I was lucky they hadn't seen my face before deciding. But he found it the next morning. I came downstairs to find him sitting at the table with the letter unfolded in front of him, his coffee mug beside it. A strange look on his face. Not proud, not excited, almost offended. He looked up at me and said, "So, this is what you've been hiding?" I blinked. Hiding? I just got it yesterday. He grunted and folded the paper neatly. Scholarship or not, don't think this means you're too good for real work. Drawing pretty pictures won't pay the bills. I didn't answer. There was no point. That box in my chest cracked a little more open. Over the next few weeks, things got worse. Subtle at first. He started forgetting to leave dinner for me if I got home late from the bookstore. He accidentally moved my laundry to the floor to wash his own. My sketchbooks disappeared more than once, only to turn up in the garage with smudged pages or water damage. And through it all, he never mentioned the tux again. Never apologized, never explained. It was like he thought if he ignored it long enough, I'd forget. But I didn't. Then came the day everything changed. It was a Saturday in early July, hot, muggy, the kind of day where even the birds seemed tired. I was off work, so I decided to visit Grandma. I hadn't seen her since graduation, but we'd been texting. She said she had something to give me. A little surprise, she'd said. When I arrived, her little house smelled like cinnamon rolls and fresh-cut roses. She always made it smell like a bakery when I came over. She handed me a glass of lemonade and led me into the sunroom. Sitting on the coffee table was a box. I raised an eyebrow. "What's this?" "Open it." Inside was a suit. Not just a suit. The tux. My tux. Midnight blue, initials in the lining. Pristine. My jaw dropped. "But I thought." She smiled a little too tightly. "That consignment shop had a good return policy." I had a hunch. Turns out after the graduation party, she'd called every men's formalwear shop in the county until she found the one with a recent by matching the tux description and the name Mark Reynolds on the receipt. She drove there the next day, paid full price to buy it back, and never told him. "I wanted you to have it," she said simply. "He didn't get to decide you weren't worth it." I hugged her so tightly I thought I'd break her ribs. I didn't want to let go. But then she said something else. "I need to tell you something," she said, sitting down and folding her hands. "I've been thinking about what he said at the ceremony, about selling it, about how he treated you." I sat beside her, sensing the change in her tone. "I've tried for years to believe Mark would grow out of it, that he was just lost after your mother left. But Lucas, he's not lost. He's rotten. And I think it's time I stopped pretending otherwise." I waited. She reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope. Inside was a copy of her will. My name was on it. My dad's name wasn't. She had changed it. Lucas, when I pass, everything goes to you. The house, the savings, the stocks. I've been planning to make the change for a while. Graduation sealed it. I couldn't speak. My hands shook. I didn't want to tell you until you were older, but I don't trust him not to find out. If he does, I need you to know it wasn't an accident. Felt like the ground shifted under my feet. I know you're strong, she said, placing a hand over mine. But be careful. He won't take it well. She was right. I didn't tell him, of course. But Grandma was right, he did find out. 2 weeks later, I came home to find the front door wide open. I stepped inside slowly. Everything looked normal, but the energy was wrong. Quiet. Too quiet. Then I saw my backpack on the kitchen floor, ripped open. My laptop was missing. My sketchbooks were tossed across the counter, some with pages torn. I turned the corner into the living room and stopped. There he was, my dad, holding the copy of the will, his hands shaking, his face unreadable. "You think you're smarter than me?" he said, voice low. "You and your grandmother plotting behind my back." I opened my mouth, but he cut me off. "She's leaving everything to you. You think you earned that? You think you deserve what I built?" I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was insane. "You didn't build any of it, Dad. She bailed you out your whole life." His eyes went wild. For a moment I thought he might hit me. Then he threw the will into the fireplace and lit a match. I lunged for it, but the flames caught fast. Too fast. By the time I grabbed the poker, the edges were already curling black. I stood there watching it burn, heart pounding, throat tight, and I realized something. This wasn't just about the suit. This was about control. About him knowing he couldn't bully Grandma anymore, couldn't make me feel small, couldn't erase me from the picture like he'd erased my mom from every photo in the house. He wanted to be the only name that mattered. And when he couldn't be, he decided to burn the whole thing down. But what he didn't know was that the copy he burned wasn't the only one. And what he really didn't know, Grandma had been planning something much, much bigger. And I was finally ready to stop playing nice. When the flames finally died out, all that remained were a few blackened corners of paper curled like dry leaves in the fireplace. My dad stood there, chest heaving, his expression flickering between triumph and uncertainty, like he wasn't sure if he'd just won or lost something important. I didn't move. I just stared at the ashes, at what was supposed to be my future, my protection, my proof. The room was heavy with silence. And in that silence, something inside me shifted. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just said, "You didn't win." His lip curled. "We'll see about that." Then he grabbed his keys and left. I stood there alone, the heat of the fire still radiating against my skin, but I wasn't warm. I felt cold, hollow, like everything I'd been holding on to, every plan, every sense of justice, every ounce of hope, had gone up in smoke with that will. That was the night I hit rock bottom. The worst part wasn't losing the paper. It wasn't even him finding out. It was knowing that a part of me still hoped, deep down, that my dad would change. That maybe if I worked hard enough or made him proud enough, he'd wake up and see me. See the person I was trying so hard to be. But he didn't see me. He never had. The next few weeks were the hardest of my life. I barely slept. I went to work with bags under my eyes and a tight jaw. I stopped drawing for a while. Every time I picked up a pencil, my hands would shake. My sketchbooks stayed shut on my shelf like tombs. At home, things got worse. He started locking the fridge. Said I was eating too much and mooching off him. He cut off the internet. Claimed it was to save money, even though I knew he just didn't want me emailing Grandma or looking up lawyers. He even tried to convince my boss at the bookstore to cut my hours. Told him I was distracted and needed discipline. Thankfully, my manager, Troy, saw right through him. He pulled me aside one day and said, "Whatever's going on at home, you've still got a job here." That meant more than he knew. I started spending more time at the store. Troy let me stay late to help organize shipments or restock shelves. I'd sit in the back room during breaks, just breathing, surrounded by the quiet hum of old pages and the comforting weight of stories that weren't mine. It became my refuge. One night, I was shelving graphic novels when Troy walked over and handed me a small package wrapped in brown paper. "This came for you," he said. I frowned. "Here?" He nodded. "Dropped off by an older woman. Said not to open it until you're alone." I waited until I was back in the break room. I peeled the paper slowly. Inside was a thick folder. Legal documents, property deeds, financial records, and a letter. Lucas, I knew he might do something like this. That's why the version he burned wasn't the only one. The original is in my lawyer's office. Copies are with my accountant and safe in a fireproof box at my house. But I wanted you to have this too. Not for proof, but for peace of mind. You are not alone. You are not powerless. And this is just the beginning. Love always, Grandma Elaine. I stared at the folder for a long time, then held the letter to my chest and let myself cry. Not out of fear, not even sadness, but relief. Someone still believed in me. The next morning, I packed a duffel bag with clothes, my tux, my sketchbooks, and the letter. I didn't leave a note. I didn't say goodbye. I just walked out the door while my dad was still asleep and biked to the nearest bus station. One transfer and 4 hours later, I was standing on Grandma's porch. She opened the door like she'd been waiting all night. She wrapped me in a hug that felt like home. "I was wondering how long it would take you," she said softly. I stayed with her the rest of the summer. At first, I felt guilty, like I was imposing, but she brushed it off every time I brought it up. "Your family," she'd say. "And this is your home, too." With her encouragement, I started drawing again, slowly at first. Doodles in the margins of napkins, sketches of her garden, portraits of her dog. She hung the first one I gave her on the fridge like it was a museum piece. I found myself getting up earlier, cooking breakfast, mowing the lawn, fixing things around the house. Not because she asked, but because I wanted to contribute. I wanted to deserve everything she was giving me. She noticed. "You don't have to prove anything to me, Lucas," she said one afternoon, watching me scrub the porch steps. "Just be who you are." Those words stuck with me. By August, I had a portfolio of new artwork. My confidence was growing. I spent my days working part-time at a small local print shop. Grandma knew the owner, and my evenings sketching, researching, and planning for college. We made a tradition of sitting on the back porch every Friday night with tea and talking about life. She told me stories about her childhood, about raising my dad, about the kind of man she hoped I'd become, stronger than him. She said once, "Kinder wiser, but not harder." I asked her what she meant. She looked out at the garden and said, "Don't let what he did harden you. Let it teach you, but don't carry the bitterness." Easier said than done, especially when the phone calls started. He called first in early September. I didn't answer. Then the texts came, "You ungrateful brat. She's manipulating you. You think this changes anything?" Then finally, "You'll regret this." I didn't reply, but Grandma saw the messages. She shook her head and said, "He's losing his grip. That's why he's lashing out." I thought she meant emotionally. I didn't know she also meant literally, because that fall she made another change to the will. Not just leaving the house and savings to me. She put me in charge of the trust fund my grandfather had left behind, one I hadn't even known existed. "Your grandfather wanted this to help the next generation," she said. "Mark squandered it. But you'll make something of it." It wasn't a huge fortune, but it was enough to cover tuition, supplies, a used car, enough to build something real. And I did. By October, I was taking online courses through the art school ahead of my official start in January. I bought a second-hand laptop, set up a workspace in the corner of Grandma's sunroom, and started freelancing. Logos, illustrations, even a few small commissions from comic book forums. My first $100 felt like gold. I didn't tell my dad any of this, but he found out. Because in November, just as the leaves were turning and Grandma was making her famous pumpkin pie, we got a knock at the door. It was him. I hadn't seen him in person since I left. He looked different, thinner, more tired. He still tried to act like he was in control, though. "Mom," he said stiffly. "Lucas, can we talk?" She didn't invite him in. I have nothing to say to you right now, she said calmly. He shifted his weight. I made mistakes, all right? I was angry, but I'm still your son. Doesn't that mean anything? You're right, she said. You are my son, and I will always love you. But love doesn't mean enabling. He turned to me. Lucas, just talk to me. Please. I didn't move. I didn't speak. And that silence, it said everything. He left without another word. That night, I sat on the porch wrapped in a blanket, staring up at the stars. I thought about everything I'd lost, everything I'd gained. And for the first time in a long time, I felt proud. Not because I'd won, but because I hadn't given up. Because I'd climbed out of the ashes and started building something new. Something mine. And I wasn't done yet. Not even close. But the part that changed everything, the twist he never saw coming, that was still waiting in the wings. Because Grandma wasn't finished either, and what she had planned next would finally turn the tables in a way no one, especially my dad, would ever forget. The air turned sharp in December, and with it, something shifted in the atmosphere between Grandma and me. Not just the comfortable warmth we'd built over the past few months that stayed, but something new threaded beneath it. Purpose. Quiet, steady, and deliberate. Like we both knew something was coming, but neither of us was in a rush to say it out loud. Until one morning, over a pot of her peppermint tea, Grandma set her mug down and said, Lucas, I want you to meet someone. I looked up from my sketch pad. Who? My attorney, she said simply. We're going to clean house. I blinked. You already changed the will. You said everything was in the trust. She nodded. That was for protection. But now it's time for action. The words sat in the air like a lit match. She explained it all calmly, like it was a checklist. The documents she'd kept locked away for years. Financial records, property titles, even a paper trail that showed just how much she'd covered for my dad over the years. Debts paid, cars fixed, a business loan that never got repaid. All of it documented, all of it signed. Mark thinks he's entitled to everything I have, she said, her voice steady. But entitlement is different from legacy. And I'm going to make sure he learns that before I go. I didn't know what to say. Part of me felt a flicker of guilt. Not for her actions, but for being the reason behind them. The other part, it felt something deeper. Permission. We met with her lawyer, a man named Philip Withers, a sharp, well-dressed 60-something with silver glasses and a no-nonsense demeanor. He didn't talk down to me. He treated me like I was in the room on purpose, not as some passive heir. This isn't about revenge, he said as we sat across from him in his office, the snow ticking softly against the windows. It's about setting boundaries. You're not cutting your father out. You're protecting yourself from the damage he's already done. Grandma handed him a flash drive. It's all there, she said. Every loan, every promise, every broken agreement. He leaned back, steepling his fingers. And the trust documents? She smiled faintly. Already updated. Lucas is the sole successor trustee. If anything happens to me, he controls the assets. He nodded approvingly. Smart. Then she turned to me. But we're not done. Over the next several weeks, the setup unfolded like a carefully orchestrated play. Grandma met with the bank, closed joint accounts she'd once shared with my dad, and rerouted all automatic payments through a new trust-managed fund. She removed his name from the emergency contact forms at her doctor's, changed the security codes on her home. She even sold the pickup truck she'd lent him years ago, the one still technically in her name, and she told him none of it. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't cruel. It was surgical. By Christmas, we were playing a very quiet, very personal game of chess. And my dad didn't even realize he was already in check. But the real turning point came on New Year's Eve. We were setting up in the living room for our usual tradition. Popcorn, old movies, thick socks, and blankets. When Grandma handed me a thin manila envelope. What's this? Open it, she said, eyes twinkling. Inside was a formal invitation. Glossy cardstock, elegant calligraphy. Elaine Reynolds cordially invites you to the legacy celebration honoring Lucas Reynolds, scholarship recipient, artist, and successor trustee. Saturday, January 14th, 6 p.m. Windsor Country Club. I read it twice before looking up. A party. A fundraiser, she corrected. But yes, also a celebration. You've earned it. I was stunned. Why? She laughed softly. Because we're going public. I blinked. Public. She nodded, folding her hands. Mark has always controlled the narrative. To his friends, to family, to the community. Always playing the victim. Telling everyone your mother ruined him. That you're ungrateful. That I coddled you. But the truth matters, Lucas. And this night, it's not just a party. It's a reset. I swallowed. Is he invited? Oh yes, she said. In fact, he's one of the guests of honor. I almost choked. Are you serious? I am, she said, her tone serene. He won't be able to resist showing up. He'll think it's about him, that I'm softening, and that's exactly what we want. She had a point. My dad's ego was too big to turn down a stage, especially if he thought he'd be praised on it. But what he didn't know was that the stage would already be set, and the spotlight wouldn't be on him. The next 2 weeks were a blur of planning. Grandma made calls. The event coordinator, a woman named Teresa with a no-nonsense voice and the organization skills of a military general, came by twice to walk us through catering, seating, lighting, and logistics. We booked a string quartet, sent formal RSVPs, and reserved the largest ballroom in the Windsor Country Club, a venue my dad had once tried and failed to rent for a failed business seminar. I remembered how bitter he'd been back then, ranting about elitist gatekeepers. It was poetic. I spent hours designing the event program myself using my artwork, incorporating subtle symbols in the borders, even embedding a hand-drawn dedication to Grandma on the back cover. I printed them in the shop after hours, carefully trimming each one by hand. Felt like building something sacred. Meanwhile, Grandma gave me full access to the guest list. That's when I had an idea. Not revenge, not exactly, more like vindication. I reached out to people who mattered, old family friends, teachers, my band director from high school, my mom's college roommate, who had always kept in touch with Grandma and had once told me she believed my mom left not because she stopped loving me, but because she was afraid of him. They all RSVP'd yes. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I called my mom. Her voice on the other end was hesitant. We hadn't spoken in almost 6 years. But the moment I told her what the event was about and who it was really for, she said just 5 words, "Tell me where to be." Grandma didn't even blink when I told her. "She deserves to see the boy you've become," she said. "And so do you." We didn't tell anyone she was coming, especially not my dad. The week of the event, things started to stir. My dad called Grandma 4 times in 3 days. Each voicemail was a little different. The first was casual curiosity. "Hey, got the invite. Sounds fun." The second, more pointed. "Didn't realize Lucas was doing so well." The third, laced with suspicion. "You're not trying to embarrass me, are you?" The last one, blunt. "If this is some kind of stunt, don't expect me to play along." She didn't return any of them. Let him squirm. Let him wonder. The day of the event, I stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the very same midnight blue tux that had once gone missing. Grandma had pressed it herself, polished the shoes, even helped with my tie. "You clean up nice," she said, stepping back with a proud smile. I turned, the weight of everything behind us and everything ahead settling on my shoulders like the finest armor. "You ready?" I asked. She met my gaze in the mirror. More than ever. We drove together, arriving early before the first guests trickled in. The ballroom glowed with soft gold light, the tables dressed in white linens and garnet napkins. A slideshow played on loop behind the stage. Images from my childhood, photos of my art, candid shots of me and Grandma in her garden. People began to arrive. First in pairs, then small groups, old neighbors, local business owners, teachers, family friends. My old history teacher, my art mentor, even Troy, my boss from the bookstore, walked in with his wife and gave me a nod that made my throat tighten. And then he arrived. My dad, Mark Reynolds. Tall, confident, wearing a suit that was a size too small and a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. He walked in like he owned the place, scanning the room for familiar faces. He spotted me near the stage. His smile widened, performative and practiced. "Lucas," he said loudly, crossing the room. "You didn't tell me you were the star of the show." He hugged me without asking. His cologne hit like a punch. I stepped back. "It's Grandma's event," I said evenly. "I'm just along for the ride." "Oh, come on," he said, gesturing to the banner behind the podium. "Your name's all over this thing. Must be nice, huh?" Before I could answer, Grandma approached. "Mark," she said smoothly, "glad you could make it." He leaned in for a kiss on her cheek. She gave him a polite nod and stepped aside. That's when he noticed the seating chart. His name wasn't next to mine. It wasn't even at our table. It was tucked in the far corner next to a retired couple who barely knew us. His brow furrowed. "What's this about?" he asked. Grandma didn't flinch. "You'll see." And he would, because what was about to happen, what we'd spent months preparing, wasn't just a speech or a slideshow or a ceremony. It was a reckoning. And the moment his past walked through that door, wearing a pale blue dress and a calm expression, he finally realized the spotlight was no longer his. The moment my mom walked through the ballroom doors, the air changed. It wasn't loud or dramatic. No screeching halt to the music, no dropped glasses or gasps. Just a ripple, subtle but unmistakable, like someone had cracked open a window in a room that had been suffocating for years. She walked in slowly, head high, wearing that soft blue dress I remembered from my childhood. Her hair had streaks of silver now, and she looked older but stronger too, like someone who had fought hard battles and survived all of them. My dad's eyes locked on her immediately. First, he didn't move. Then, his mouth twitched, barely masking the panic that flickered behind his eyes. He stood there frozen, and I could see his hands curl into fists before he shoved them in his pockets. My mom didn't flinch. She crossed the room with grace, stopping only once to nod at Grandma before coming to stand beside me. She gently touched my arm and gave me a small, proud smile. It wasn't much, but after 6 years of silence, it was everything. "Hey, Lucas," she said, voice soft. I didn't respond with words. I just nodded and squeezed her hand. She squeezed back. Mark started walking toward us, slow, like he wasn't sure whether to charge or retreat. I could tell he hadn't expected this. He never thought she'd show her face again. Not after the way he told everyone she'd abandoned us, that she was unstable, that she didn't care about me. He'd crafted that lie so carefully, built his whole reputation around it, and now she was here, alive, steady, smiling. He stopped a few feet from us. "What is this?" he muttered. "Why is she here?" Grandma stepped in before I could respond. "Because she has every right to be." His eyes narrowed. "You invited her?" "I did," Grandma said calmly. "And Lucas did too." He looked at me, and for the first time in my life, I didn't look away. I met his gaze and held it. Then he chuckled, bitter and shaky. "This is what this night is about, huh? A little stunt. A family ambush." "No," I said, stepping forward. "This night is about the truth, and everyone here deserves to hear it." He scoffed. "What truth? That your grandmother's brainwashed you? That your mother ran off and now wants a redemption arc? That you, Mark?" Grandma's voice cut through the noise like a blade. He froze. "You've spent years painting yourself as a victim," she said. "To friends, to family, to this community. And while you did that, Lucas was quietly surviving your bitterness, your manipulation, your control. Don't," he warned. But she didn't stop. She turned toward the growing crowd, her voice rising just enough to be heard. "I want to thank you all for coming tonight. Some of you have known our family for decades. Some of you watched Lucas grow up. Many of you have heard versions of our stories told by Mark Reynolds. Tonight, I'd like to share the version that matters." Mark's face reddened. "This is ridiculous." "No," I said, stepping forward beside her. "This is overdue." I pulled a remote from my pocket and clicked it. The slideshow behind us changed. Gone were the childhood pictures. Now came receipts, loan agreements, screenshots of texts, financial statements, dated emails, a carefully ordered slideshow documenting 15 years of Grandma's silent support and my dad's silent sabotage. The guests watched in stunned silence. I spoke next, calmly, clearly. I wore a thrift store suit to my graduation because my dad sold the custom tux my grandmother bought for me. I didn't find out until the morning of the ceremony. He never apologized, just said it wouldn't have looked good on me anyway. I paused, let that sit. He also burned the first copy of Grandma's will in our fireplace because he couldn't stand the idea that he wouldn't control everything she built. People started murmuring. A few turned to look at him. He shrank back, face twisted in disbelief. "You think this is revenge?" he snapped. "You're just a kid playing lawyer. None of this will hold up." "It already has," said a new voice. Philip Withers, Grandma's lawyer, stood near the front table. He held up a leather-bound folder. "All documentation has been notarized. Multiple witnesses. Assets are already transferred to the trust. Mark Reynolds holds no financial or legal claim to Elaine Reynolds' estate." Mark's mouth opened and closed like he couldn't breathe. Someone clapped. Then another. And then the whole room was applauding. Not for me, not for revenge, but for the end of a lie and the start of something honest. Later that night, after most of the guests had left and the string quartet had packed up their instruments, Mark confronted us again in the parking lot. His voice was low and furious. "You think this is over? You think humiliating me fixes anything?" "No," I said, stepping between him and my mom. "This isn't about fixing you. This is about finally protecting us." He sneered. "You'll come crawling back one day. You'll need me." "I needed a father for 18 years, I said quietly. "You weren't there." He stared at me for a long time, then got into his car and drove off without another word. We haven't seen him since. The weeks after the event were quiet, peaceful, like the house could finally exhale. I started my first semester at the art school in January. Grandma helped me move into student housing with a care package full of snacks and handwritten notes tucked between my sketchbooks. My mom and I started talking more, slowly, carefully. I wasn't ready to forgive everything, not yet, but I was ready to try, and so was she. One night, a few weeks into the semester, she called me out of the blue. "I was proud of you that night," she said, "for standing up to him, for telling the truth." I didn't know what to say, so I just said, "Thanks," and that was enough. As for Grandma, she's still gardening, still making tea, still telling me I need to wear socks indoors or I'll catch cold in the bones. She's not just my guardian anymore. She's my anchor, my mentor, my hero. And now, thanks to her, thanks to all of it, I finally know who I am. Not a victim, not a shadow, but a name worth carrying forward. Lucas Reynolds. Artist, student, grandson, survivor, and the man who broke the cycle. Now on to the next story. Story 4. If you told me a year ago that the woman I loved would one day toast to my humiliation in front of her family, I'd have laughed it off or maybe cried. I honestly don't know which would have felt more fitting. My name's Kyle. I'm 36 and I used to believe in fairy tales. The kind where you marry your best friend, grow old together, and weather whatever life throws at you. Turns out I was the only one in our story reading the same book. I thought our 7th wedding anniversary would be another quiet celebration. Maybe a dinner at our favorite spot by the harbor or a movie night at home, her curled up beside me like she always used to on chilly evenings. I didn't expect a party, and I definitely didn't expect a spectacle. But before we get there, before the champagne glasses clinked and my wife delivered her little speech, I need to rewind because I don't want you thinking this came out of nowhere. The signs were there. Hindsight has a way of spotlighting all the red flags you ignored in real time. I met Lauren when we were both 27. She worked in marketing. Sleek, driven, always the smartest person in any room. I was the quieter one, an engineer more comfortable solving systems than navigating social circles. But we clicked. She said I made her feel calm, grounded. I told her she made me feel seen. That was enough back then. Our first few years were golden. She laughed at my dry jokes, called me her safe place. And I thought we were invincible. We weren't rich, but I had started a small automation company with a couple of old college buddies, and it was growing slowly but steadily. She was killing it at her agency, rising through the ranks. We bought a modest house in a quiet neighborhood. Nothing extravagant, just ours. We shared dreams like people share coffee every morning, effortlessly. But things started shifting around year 5. First, it was little things. Lauren would roll her eyes when I brought up work. Not in a mean way, just disinterested, dismissive. If I had a tough day dealing with a bug in our latest software patch or a setback with a client, she'd say things like, "Maybe you should let someone else handle that part." Or, "You stress too much over boring stuff." I chalked it up to stress. Her job was demanding, and we just started trying for a baby, which brought its own pressure. Then came the family gatherings. Lauren's family was always a bit intense. Her mother, Cynthia, was the kind of woman who wore diamonds to Sunday brunch and never missed a chance to comment on someone's outfit or income. Her brother, Logan, was a finance bro caricature, always talking about leveraging assets and making passive income off other people's labor. Her dad, Martin, was quieter but seemed to carry the same air of superiority, like everyone else was playing life on easy mode and they were competing on a higher level. From day one, I could tell I wasn't their ideal pick for Lauren. I didn't come from money. My parents were public school teachers. I wasn't flashy. I wore sneakers to their fancy dinner parties. I drank beer instead of wine. But Lauren always told me it didn't matter. "They don't get to choose who makes me happy," she'd whisper. And for a while, I believed her. But at a family barbecue 2 years ago, something shifted. Logan made a snide remark about how tech guys are just blue-collar with Wi-Fi. And when I laughed it off, Lauren didn't defend me. In fact, she laughed too. Not nervously, not out of politeness. She genuinely found it funny. I remember looking at her, trying to catch her eye, and she just turned away to get another drink. I let it go. One joke. I told myself, don't be sensitive. But then came Thanksgiving. Cynthia was hosting, and everything was, as usual, over the top. Caterers, a string quartet, gold-trimmed napkins. At dinner, Cynthia turned to me and said, "So, Kyle, still tinkering with wires and circuits? Or has your little company finally gotten out of the garage?" She smiled sweetly, but her eyes were sharp. Lauren didn't say a word. In fact, she changed the subject to how Logan just closed a big deal in New York. That night, on the way home, I brought it up. I told Lauren it bothered me that her family treated me like some underachieving intern. She sighed. "Kyle, they're just joking. Can't you take a joke?" I asked her if she respected what I did. She hesitated just for a second, but it was there. "I do," she finally said. "But let's be honest, your company isn't exactly Google." That one stung. Not because I needed her to hype me up all the time, but because I thought she saw how hard I was working, how much I was building, not just for myself but for us. I started staying late at the office more. It wasn't to avoid her, not at first. I was just focused. We were on the verge of signing a deal with a major logistics firm. Could double our revenue, triple it even. I didn't tell Lauren right away. I wanted it to be a surprise. Meanwhile, Lauren's wardrobe got pricier, her attitude sharper. She started going out more, said it was for networking, but I noticed she always got home later than she used to, often smelling of wine and some overpriced perfume I didn't recognize. One night, I came home to find she'd cleared a shelf in our shared office for her new vision board. It was filled with quotes like, "Don't settle, level up," and "Comfort kills ambition." Her laptop wallpaper was now a picture of some woman in heels standing on the edge of a rooftop overlooking a skyline. It felt ominous, like she was mentally climbing away from me. I tried suggesting we do date nights again. She said she was too busy. I booked a weekend getaway. She canceled last minute for a girls' trip. I asked if we could talk. She said, "We're just in different places right now. You focus on your company. Let me breathe." That should have been the wake-up call, but I kept holding on, thinking she'd come around. The final straw before everything spiraled was a dinner at her parents' place about a month before our anniversary. I'd finally closed the logistics deal. My company was booming. We were hiring, scaling, even moving to a new office downtown. I was proud, and I thought, finally, this will be the moment her family sees me differently, respects me. At dinner, I mentioned the new deal. Cynthia gave me a polite smile. Logan smirked. Congrats, man. Now maybe you can finally buy a real car. Lauren didn't say a word. In fact, she changed the topic again, this time to her new mentor, a CEO from her agency who was teaching her how to think bigger. That night, I told her how much that hurt. She just stared at me, quiet for a long moment, before saying, "Kyle, you're a good man, but maybe I need more than good." I didn't sleep that night. Couldn't. That phrase haunted me. And then came our anniversary. She texted me a week before saying she had a surprise planned. "Wear something nice, formal. You'll love it." I was hopeful. Maybe she'd remembered what we used to be. Maybe this was her trying. I showed up at the venue she texted me, an upscale lounge downtown. Everyone was there, her family, some of her coworkers, even a few people I didn't recognize. The lights were low, the music elegant, the drinks flowing. And then, just as I was settling in, she tapped her glass. The room quieted. She stood in the center, radiant, smiling like it was the happiest day of her life. "Kyle," she said, turning to me, "7 years. It's been something." Laughter, nervous, confused. I smiled awkwardly. "And now," she continued, "I think it's time for both of us to step into who we were really meant to be." She reached into her bag and pulled out a manila envelope. "I'm upgrading my life," she said, lifting her glass. "To new beginnings." She handed me the envelope, divorce papers, and the room erupted in cheers. Her brother clapped me on the back and muttered, "Took her long enough." Her mother sipped her wine, clearly enjoying the show. I didn't say a word. I just opened the envelope, skimmed it, signed, and walked out. I didn't look back. The night I walked out of that anniversary party, something inside me snapped. Not in the dramatic throw a glass kind of way. Quietly, internally, like a wire that had been stretched too far for too long had finally gone taut and snapped with a sound only I could hear. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just drove. No destination, no music, just the hum of the engine and the occasional vibration of my phone. Text alerts, I figured. Or maybe just spam. I didn't check. That first week was a blur. I moved into the guest room at my friend Marcus' place. He offered without asking questions. Just threw me a spare key and said, "Stay as long as you need." I needed that kind of quiet support. I couldn't deal with pity or pep talks. My lawyer, thankfully a friend from college, reviewed the divorce papers and called me, baffled. She filed everything already. Like, everything. This wasn't spontaneous, Kyle. This was orchestrated. That word stuck with me. Orchestrated. It felt like the perfect term for what Lauren had done. Planned like a symphony of humiliation. Every note hit with precision. The timing, the audience, the toast. Even the party venue wasn't casual. It was a place we'd once said we'd book for our 10-year anniversary. Ironic. But here's the thing about me. I may be quiet. I may look like the guy who shrugs things off and keeps his head down. But I remember everything. I replay conversations. I catalog tone, inflection, pauses. I'm not a revenge kind of guy by nature, but when you burn every bridge and then light a firework on the ashes, I start taking notes. The weeks that followed were full of slow, quiet unraveling. I kept working. My company, Synchrobyte Systems, was doing better than ever. That logistics contract turned into 3 more. We brought on 2 new developers and a client liaison. I moved out of Marcus Place and into a short-term rental while house hunting. I didn't tell anyone from Lauren's circle where I was. I deleted mutual contacts, changed my number, even left social media. Radio silence. That silence made people nervous, apparently. A month after the party, Logan, her brother, texted me out of the blue. "Yo, you good?" I didn't respond. 2 days later, "You being salty or what?" I still didn't reply. Then came the Instagram post. Lauren standing on a rooftop with a drink in hand and a new caption. "Soft life season. No dead weight allowed." Hundreds of likes. Her mom commented, "Proud of you, sweetheart," followed by nail polish emojis. I remember looking at it for a long time. Not because it hurt, but because it didn't anymore. Not like before. What hurt more was the realization that for years, I defended people who never once defended me. Then came the real gut punch. 3 weeks after the post, I got an envelope in the mail. No return address. Inside was a glossy invitation. Not just any invitation, it was for Logan's engagement party. Lauren had apparently helped plan it. Taped to the invite was a sticky note in familiar handwriting. No hard feelings. You're still welcome. Dress code upscale. Don't embarrass yourself. I stared at it for a while. Then I laughed. That night, I made a decision. I wasn't going to show up at that party, but I wasn't going to disappear either. Instead, I got to work. I poured every ounce of myself into the company. Long hours, strategic hires. I pulled off 3 major deals in 8 weeks. By month 4 post-divorce, Synchrobyte had grown so fast that we'd outgrown the downtown office space I was so proud of just a year ago. We started leasing a modern, glass-walled building on the edge of the business district. It had views of the skyline, a full espresso bar, and a rooftop garden that made that Instagram post of Lauren's look like a Motel 6 balcony. But the universe wasn't done yet. One afternoon, while I was reviewing floor plans for my new house, yes, house, because I was finally building my dream home, I got a call from Marcus. You might want to sit down, he said. I already am, I replied. You remember Lauren's company? The agency? I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. They just laid off 30% of staff. Guess who was one of them? I blinked. No way. Oh yeah, budget cuts. New leadership. They axed the entire department she was climbing through. Apparently, her mentor jumped ship last month. Lauren's out. I didn't say anything. I didn't even know what to feel. Pity? Satisfaction? Emptiness? Then he added, Cynthia's spa closed, too. Apparently some back taxes and shady bookkeeping. Within days, things began to unravel faster. Lauren's Instagram changed tone. No more rooftop cocktails or empowerment quotes. Just vague, moody captions. One read, Not everything goes as planned. Just got to keep going. No likes from Logan or Cynthia. Strange. A week later, I got another envelope in the mail. No return address again. Inside, a letter from a landlord. Apparently, Lauren had listed me as an emergency contact years ago when we rented a vacation place together. The letter explained that she defaulted on rent at her current apartment and that they were seeking to locate any related parties for contact information. It was addressed to me by mistake, but it told me everything I needed to know. Lauren was broke or close to it. I didn't respond. But that night, I drove past the old apartment we used to share, the one she left after the divorce. It was dark, empty, and quiet. I parked down the street and watched for a while, unsure what I was even hoping to see. The next day, I checked public listings. She'd filed for unemployment. Her LinkedIn showed open to work. Logan's engagement party had been canceled due to scheduling conflicts. Cynthia had deactivated her Facebook. It all felt surreal, but I still hadn't heard from Lauren directly. Not until month 6. It was raining. I'd just gotten home from a late dinner with clients. My new place was finally finished. A sleek, 2-story mansion on the edge of town with a long driveway and a black iron gate. I pulled in, tapped the remote, and the gate started closing behind me. That's when I saw her standing in the rain. Soaked, no umbrella, hair plastered to her face. She looked up as the lights from my car hit her. Lauren. She ran forward as the gate finished closing, her palms hitting the bars. Kyle, she shouted. I didn't move. I just sat in the car, hands on the wheel, heart suddenly heavy. She called again, this time quieter. Please, just talk to me. I didn't get out. I didn't even roll down the window. My phone buzzed. First 1 message, then 5, all from her. I'm sorry. Can we talk? I made a mistake. Please, I need help. I looked up at her gripping the gate, crying. That same gate she'd metaphorically shoved me out of 6 months ago. Now it stood between us physically, silently. As the rain poured down and she pleaded with the one person she'd once discarded for a photo op. I didn't open the window. I didn't open the gate. I just watched her messages roll in from the warmth of my car. But this wasn't the end. It was just the moment I realized the power dynamic had flipped. And for the first time, I held the pen in the story she once thought she was writing alone. For the first few minutes, I just sat there. Lauren's figure flickered through the rain-streaked windshield like a ghost. Half real, half memory. I should have felt triumphant, vindicated even. After all, wasn't this the moment every betrayed husband imagines in his darkest, sleepless hours? Her broken, me thriving. She begging at the gate I now owned. But what I felt wasn't pride, not yet. It was tiredness, a kind of emotional fatigue that weighed down the moment. Maybe because it had taken everything to get here. 6 months ago, when I walked away from that anniversary party with divorce papers in hand and 1,000 fake smiles behind me, I didn't have a plan. I had some money, sure. A company that was doing okay. Friends who cared. But emotionally, I was hollowed out. Betrayal has a way of doing that. It's not just the act itself. It's the death of every belief that led up to it. The trust, the time, the tiny sacrifices you made believing they mattered. And for what? A toast? A punchline? So yeah, I hit rock bottom. But I did it quietly. No drinking binges, no rebound flings. I didn't burn her clothes or post passive-aggressive quotes online. That's not who I am. Instead, I folded into myself. I became surgical with my time, my emotions. My calendar filled with client calls and code reviews and strategic meetings, but my nights were silent. Lonely even. I kept a spare toothbrush at Marcus Place for weeks longer than I needed to. Not because I didn't have anywhere else to go, but because I wasn't ready to call any place mine again. I started journaling. It's not something I ever thought I'd do, but my therapist, I started therapy too, recommended it. At first, it was just rage. Pages and pages of what I wished I'd said that night. Things like, how long did you plan it? Was I just a stepping stone for you? Did you ever really love me? Or just the version of me you thought you could upgrade from later? But over time, the rage turned into reflection, and then strategy. See, I realized something in that silence. I'd been shrinking for years, playing small to keep the peace, making myself easier to digest so Lauren wouldn't feel the need to spit me out. I had ambitions, big ones, but I muted them because she once said, "Don't be one of those guys who thinks money fixes everything." So I worked hard, but never flashed it. I invested, but never celebrated. I downplay success so she wouldn't feel overshadowed. I was done with that. Syncrobite had potential, serious potential. And now, without the emotional drain of a toxic home life, I could pour myself into building it properly. I hired a leadership coach. Not some cheap motivational speaker, but a guy who'd helped startups scale fast and clean. He worked with me 3 times a week. We tore apart my systems, rebuilt hiring pipelines, restructured the dev teams, and negotiated new performance-based contracts that scaled with growth. Within 2 months, we doubled our client base. Within 3, we landed a tech integration deal with a regional hospital system. I didn't just rebuild. I transformed. And it wasn't just the business. I started lifting again. Nothing crazy, just strength training 3 mornings a week. It helped clear my head, gave me something to control when everything else felt unsteady. I took a cooking class. I know it sounds random, but I was tired of takeout and sadness sandwiches. And something about learning how to perfect a risotto felt oddly empowering. I cut contact with Lauren entirely. Blocked numbers, blocked emails. My lawyer handled the divorce logistics. I paid what I needed to, but not a cent more. She tried to negotiate for alimony at one point, claiming she'd supported me emotionally while I built my business. My lawyer laughed in the meeting. "You mean the company you publicly mocked at family dinners?" We offered a flat settlement instead. She took it, and I bought land. I didn't just want a new apartment or a fancy condo. I wanted permanence. I found a plot on the edge of the city. Quiet, elevated, with a view of the skyline. I hired an architect. I gave them my dream. Open spaces, clean lines, lots of glass and light. A home built for peace. It became my obsession. I'd leave the office at 6 p.m. sharp just to drive out to the construction site. I watched every beam go up like it was part of me. Sometimes I'd bring a thermos of coffee and just sit in my car, imagining furniture layouts and weekend barbecues with friends. A future without apology. Meanwhile, whispers about Lauren started to reach me. Apparently, her mentor bailed on her right before the agency restructured. The position she thought she'd be promoted into vanished. Her network shrank. People started avoiding her calls. She'd gotten a reputation for being, well, ruthless and not in the flattering sense. In marketing, you can be cold, but you can't be careless. And Lauren had gotten careless. One contact told me she tried launching her own consulting brand. It lasted 3 weeks. No clients, a few Instagram posts, then radio silence. And then I heard about Cynthia's mess. The spa she owned with her sister had been audited. Some shady write-offs, missed taxes, and a whole lot of debt under Cynthia's name. She tried to offload some blame onto Lauren, but Lauren wasn't listed as an owner. Cynthia ended up downsizing her home. Logan had to cancel his engagement party, not because of scheduling conflicts, but because the bride-to-be found out he'd been gambling their savings on crypto projects. It was like the whole family had built their lives on a pile of glitter and glass, and now the rain had come. But even then, I kept my distance, until the house was done, until I stood on that rooftop patio looking out at the skyline with a glass of bourbon in hand, feeling something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not happiness, not yet, but peace. Then came that night in the rain. Lauren, soaked, begging, hands wrapped around the iron gate like a penitent trying to enter a sanctuary she once desecrated. And still, I didn't open the gate. Couldn't. Not yet. Because something about seeing her like that, so small, so desperate, flicked a switch in me. I remembered how she used to talk about me to her friends. The little comments like, "He's great, but not very ambitious," or, "I love him, but sometimes I feel like I'm dragging him up with me." And now here she was, homeless, jobless, crying, not on some symbolic level, but literally crying in the rain outside the mansion she never saw being built. The old Kyle might have cracked, might have pitted her, might have thought this was his chance to be the bigger person. But the man she discarded at that party was gone, buried under 6 months of silence, steel, and self-respect. I didn't let her in that night, but I didn't delete her messages either. I went inside, took a hot shower, ate reheated chicken marsala I'd made the night before, sat at the grand oak desk in my study, and opened my laptop. And then, out of morbid curiosity, I clicked on her LinkedIn. Still open to work. Still nothing new. Then I saw her new post. Just 3 lines. "I messed up. Burned bridges I thought I'd never need again. If anyone's hiring, I'm available. Humbled. Ready." Dozens of reactions, a few "you got this" comments, but no offers. I closed the tab. Then my phone buzzed again. Another message from her. "I'm sorry. I don't need anything, just closure. Please." I didn't reply. I stared at the blinking cursor in the message box for a long time, my fingers hovering over the screen. But I didn't type. Instead, I looked around the study. Custom bookshelves, walnut flooring, tall glass windows with stormproof blinds. A house not built for revenge, but for a man who finally knew his worth. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I owed anyone anything. Not even closure. Not yet. The rain had stopped by morning, but the dried streaks of it on my gate and the muddy footprints just beyond it lingered like evidence. Evidence that she had been there. Evidence that she'd been willing to stand in the cold for over an hour trying to catch my attention. Something she used to take for granted when we were married. I didn't tell anyone about the visit at first. Not Marcus, not my team, not even my therapist. I needed time to process what it meant. Was it desperation, manipulation, guilt, or maybe just her final Hail Mary because she had nowhere else to go? Whatever it was, it woke something in me. Not hate, not pity, just clarity. For months, I'd been focused on rebuilding, on healing, on protecting my peace. But now something had shifted. She had tried to publicly destroy me, and I had survived. Thrived, even. But survival wasn't the end. There was one piece missing. The final turning of the knife that would ensure I was never seen as the same Kyle she once mocked. I didn't want revenge for revenge's sake. I wanted something cleaner, something permanent. Not a spectacle, just justice. Something that would shift the story from Kyle, the ex she humiliated, to Kyle, the man who rose from ashes while she drowned in smoke. So I started planning. Step 1. Information. You can't fight what you don't understand. So I reached out to someone I hadn't spoken to since the divorce. Devin. Devin was Lauren's ex-coworker, someone she used to trash talk all the time, called her too soft, too sentimental. But Devin had always been kind to me, and she messaged me after the divorce to say she was sorry for what Lauren did. I'd never responded. Now, 6 months later, I dug through my old messages, found hers, and sent a reply. Appreciated your message. Hope you're doing well. Quick question. Did you ever end up at Straightedge Agency? She responded within minutes. Hey Kyle. Wow, long time. Yeah, I'm at Straightedge now. Been here about 4 months. What's up? Just curious. Heard Lauren tried applying there. Another ping. She did. Came in strong. Name dropped all over the place. Didn't go well. Our manager remembered her from a pitch where she undermined the client to their face. Total red flag. Did she know you were there? Yep. Tried to pretend like we were besties. HR wasn't buying it. What's going on? I paused. Just gathering context. Thanks for being honest. Always. You deserve better. That was the first breadcrumb. Lauren's reputation had followed her, and not in a good way. The industry was smaller than she realized, and burning bridges had cost her more than just job offers. Her name had become synonymous with risky hires and unpredictable behavior. Step 2. The public image. Lauren used to live for perception. Her Instagram, her LinkedIn, her social circle, all curated like museum pieces. But now that the pedestal had crumbled, I wondered how much of her world still saw her as the woman who upgraded her life. So I called Marcus. I need a favor, I said. Name it. I want to host something. Quiet, private, but strategic. He chuckled. You mean like a revenge party? Not exactly. More like a soft launch. Let people see what I've built. Let the right people be in the room. Got it. Who's on the guest list? That's where it got fun. I started listing names. Former clients, industry contacts, a few of Lauren's old colleagues who'd reached out after the divorce, even Cynthia's former partner at the spa, the one she burned when the audit happened. The goal wasn't to flaunt success. It was to reclaim the narrative, to remind people that I wasn't some quiet guy who got dumped. I was a builder, a leader, someone they wanted to align with. We planned a rooftop gathering at my new place. Sunset catered, minimal press, just enough photos to make their way onto LinkedIn and the social feeds of the right people. Step 3, the chessboard. It wasn't just about Lauren anymore. It was about the whole toxic ecosystem that had enabled her behavior. Cynthia with her snide remarks and passive-aggressive digs. Logan with his smug superiority and fragile masculinity. And Lauren, the queen of the show, who thought life was just a sequence of power plays. I started making subtle moves. A contact of mine in real estate mentioned that Logan had been shopping for investment properties but didn't have enough liquid capital since the failed engagement. So I made an anonymous cash offer on a place he was eyeing, just high enough to price him out. When he lost the deal, I heard he blamed the system. I didn't correct him. Cynthia, she'd been trying to open a pop-up version of her spa business in the same shopping district where my company was headquartered. She was in talks with a leasing agent I happened to know personally. I invited the agent to my housewarming. Over drinks, I casually mentioned that Cynthia's last business had been flagged for tax issues and owed back wages to 2 employees. The lease offer was rescinded within the week. But none of it felt as satisfying as it should have, because Lauren was still out there somewhere between regret and desperation. And for all the ways I could maneuver behind the scenes, I knew the final act needed to be direct. It had to be personal. She sent another message 2 weeks after the rain incident. I understand if you never want to speak to me again, but I'm not asking for money. I just want you to know I'm sorry. Still, I didn't reply, but I kept the message. Then she called. The number showed up as unknown, but I knew it was her. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail. Hey, I don't know if you even listened to these, but I had to say this. I was cruel. I know that now. That party, I thought I was making a statement, but all I did was destroy the one person who actually cared about me. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I just wanted you to hear that I know what I did. I miss you. Not the money, not the house. Just you. I listened to it twice, maybe 3 times. Still didn't respond. Because this wasn't about closure anymore. It was about setting the board for the final play. The party was 2 weeks away. I spent that time tightening every detail. Not just the event, but my image, my company, my circle. I gave interviews, quiet ones, business podcasts, startup blogs. Nothing flashy. Just enough buzz. Just enough movement. And then, without fanfare, I sent out one last invitation to Lauren. No note, just a card with my name, the date, and the address. I knew she'd recognize it. I didn't know if she'd come, but if she did, she'd be walking into a room filled with the very people she once used to impress. People who now respected me not because I was flashy, but because I had built something worth respecting. This wasn't revenge. This was reckoning. The day of the party arrived without drama. I woke up early that morning, the sky still gray from the fading mist of dawn. My house, my mansion, if we're being technical, stood calm and elegant like it knew something important was about to happen. I walked barefoot across the polished oak floors of my home, coffee in hand, checking last-minute details. The catering staff arrived at noon, the event planner an hour later. By 3, the rooftop garden was transformed into something out of a magazine. Warm string lights, soft jazz playing, candles flickering in hurricane glass. Minimalist perfection. Marcus arrived early as always. He stood on the balcony in a navy suit, sipping whiskey, his expression half amused, half impressed. "Big night," he said. "Not for me," I replied, adjusting my cufflinks. "It's just a party." He smirked. "Right?" By 6 p.m., guests began to arrive. Quiet murmurs, laughter, the clink of glasses. Some I hadn't seen in years. Others were industry heavyweights I'd only recently begun working with. Everyone shook my hand a little longer than usual. Everyone looked at the house a little too long. That was by design. The whispers started early. "Have you seen this place? Is this Kyle's? Did you hear about the expansion?" I smiled politely, played the host, and offered refills. I wasn't trying to boast. I was just letting the silence speak for itself. At 7:13, she arrived. Lauren. She stepped onto the rooftop in a black dress that looked borrowed. Her hair was tied up, a few strands falling loose in a way that used to feel deliberate. Tonight, it looked accidental. She was thinner than I remembered. Not sickly, just faded. As if the brightness she once carried had flickered out, leaving the frame intact but the soul dulled. She scanned the room until she saw me. Our eyes met across the crowd. She didn't smile. Neither did I. For a moment, the room hushed in my mind, the kind of tunnel vision you get when something irreversible is about to happen. But then the moment passed and the music, the chatter, the evening continued. I walked over calmly, a glass in each hand. "Pinot Noir?" I asked, offering one to her. She hesitated, then took it. "You look good," she said. "So do you," I replied. A lie, maybe, but I didn't need to win on that front. We stood at the edge of the balcony overlooking the skyline, the same skyline she used to post on Instagram, quoting motivational nonsense about owning your future and upgrading your life. The same skyline that now sat beneath my feet, not hers. "Why did you invite me?" she asked finally. I took a sip. "Because I wanted you to see the view." She didn't speak right away. Then, "I'm not going to beg. I already did that." "I know." She turned to face me, her voice quieter. "I was stupid, Kyle. I thought I needed more. I thought you were holding me back." "You didn't just leave," I said. "You staged it. You choreographed my humiliation like it was some performance art." She flinched. "Good. I know," she whispered. "Was it worth it?" I asked. Tears welled up in her eyes. She blinked them away quickly, embarrassed. "I thought I had it all figured out. The job, the status, the future." She laughed bitterly. Turns out I had no idea how fragile everything was. I didn't respond. She didn't deserve a comforting word. But I did listen. That much I could offer her. Then she asked the question I'd been waiting for. Is there any part of you that still misses me? And there it was, the opening. I looked at her for a long time, studied her face. Not the one I fell in love with years ago. That woman was gone. This version was just the echo of who she used to be. I did, I said, for a while. A pause. But then I realized the version of you I missed never really existed. Her eyes filled again. This time she didn't blink it away. I thought I was upgrading, she said. That night. It was supposed to be my moment. And now I've lost everything. I live with a friend. I can't get hired anywhere. Even my mom won't return my calls unless I promise her money I don't have. That's not my fault. I know. But I don't know how to move forward. Another opening, and this time the final one. I leaned in slightly, lowering my voice. You don't move forward by dragging someone back in. Then I reached into my jacket and pulled out a small, cream-colored envelope. She looked at it, confused. What's this? Your chance. She opened it slowly. Inside was a check, $10,000. Her eyes widened. Kyle, I didn't come here to ask for. It's not a gift, I said, interrupting her. Payment for what? I nodded toward the party. This entire event was about perception. You showing up here completes the picture. You came in from the rain. You saw what I built. You were civil. We spoke. It closes the loop. She stared at me, stunned. I needed everyone to see that chapter closed. Not a dramatic fallout, not a tragic story. Just done. You being here gives me that. The check is compensation for your role in that closure. She held the check like it burned her fingers. You're buying closure? She asked, almost offended. No, I built closure. This is just the receipt. Silence. Then she folded the check, slipped it back in the envelope, and nodded slowly. You really are a different man. No, I said. I'm the same man you underestimated. That's the difference. With that, I turned and walked away. Back to the warmth, the laughter, the people who saw me for who I was without needing me to shrink to fit their expectations. I didn't look back. Later that night, after the guests had gone and the lights were dimmed, Marcus joined me on the balcony again. Well? He asked. She took the check. He raised an eyebrow. Seriously? Yep. Slipped it in her purse like it weighed 10 pounds. He laughed. You're colder than I thought. I'm not cold, I said, sipping the last of my drink. I'm just finally done playing the fool. And in that quiet moment, overlooking the city that once seemed so far away, I felt something shift. Not vengeance, not victory, just peace. The kind of peace that comes when the storm is over, the flood has passed, and you're standing on solid ground. Alone but free. And that, I realized, was the real upgrade. Now on to the next story. Story 5. 3 days before the wedding, my sister messaged. Still waiting on the last 2 gifts. Don't show your face without them. My mom said, if you were real family, you'd complete the list. I said nothing. I canceled the 5 gifts I already bought and froze the catering funds I was covering. 2 days later, my phone lit up with 29 calls. My sister was screaming when she found out the main news. If my sister had thought just a little harder before pressing send on that message, maybe things wouldn't have unraveled the way they did. But she didn't. She figured I'd fall in line like always. She never imagined I'd be the one to torch the whole plan. And she definitely didn't expect it to happen 3 days before her wedding. The message came late at night. No greeting. No thank you. Just, still waiting on the last 2 gifts. Don't show your face without them. 15 minutes later, my mom called. Her words were even colder. If you were real family, you'd complete the list. I didn't reply. I didn't argue. I didn't even feel angry. It was just quiet. The kind of quiet where things shift, where you realize you've been taken for a ride, and the only person who didn't see it coming was you. 6 months ago, I was the one who agreed to help with the wedding. That's the word they used. Help. I covered the venue without hesitation, paid the full deposit, arranged catering, and even booked the couple a 2-week trip to Hawaii as a surprise gift. Flights, resort, excursions, everything. I helped choose the invitations, paid for the photographer, and took calls they couldn't be bothered to return. I kept receipts, but I didn't keep score. I thought this was what family did. Then came the infamous gift list. 10 items. 5 of them were basic. An espresso machine, a vacuum, matching robes, and a fancy wine set. I bought all 5 within a week. But the last 2? A Rolex and a new car. No joke, no price limit, no discussion. I figured it had to be a mistake. It wasn't. When I asked about it, my sister brushed it off like it was obvious. She said a luxury watch and a car would elevate the aesthetic. Her words. I said it wasn't going to happen. She said, "Well, then I hope the venue is refundable." I still didn't react. I just noted it. 2 weeks out from the wedding, there was a family get-together. Small group. Just parents, a few cousins, the bridal party, and both families. She gave a toast, thanking her fiancé's parents for making all of this possible. Not a word about me. Not about the venue, the trip, the planning, nothing. Afterwards, she pulled me aside to ask again about the car. I said no. She said the wedding had to look impressive, that people would be watching. I reminded her I'd already spent more than enough. Then her fiancé walked up and said, loud enough for others to hear, "Kind of wild that you work in tech and can't swing a car and a Rolex. What's the point of tech money then?" Everyone laughed except me. That night, back in my apartment, I sat in the dark with my laptop open. I pulled up the venue contract and reread the terms twice before canceling it. I even told them to keep the $2,000 deposit, my parting gift. Then I paused the catering payment, froze the rest of the expenses, and canceled every remaining order. The last thing I did was text my sister. "Venue and catering are no longer covered. You'll need to make other arrangements." Then I turned off my phone. When I turned it back on the next morning, I had 29 missed calls. My phone blew up like I'd set fire to the entire family tree. The first voicemail was just my sister yelling over what sounded like doors slamming. The second was my mom crying or pretending to, asking me how I could betray blood like this. The third was pure rage. "Do you understand what you've done to your own sister?" Then silence, followed by a click. I didn't respond to any of them. By noon, the texts kept rolling in. My dad tried a different approach. Calm, diplomatic, the voice he only used when something expensive was on the line. He said, "You've made your point. Now let's be reasonable. It's not too late to fix this." Fix what though? Me not being an ATM? Still, I said nothing. I wasn't trying to make a point. I was done. What I didn't realize was that I wasn't just ruining their wedding. I was exposing something they thought they had locked in tight. A lie. Because up until that day, the groom's side of the family believed they had been paying for everything. My sister and her fiancé had told them it was all being handled by his side, that everything extravagant, the luxury venue, the catering, the trip to Hawaii, was a gift from the groom's parents and that they were just keeping it quiet to avoid tension. So, when the venue backed out and catering shut down and there was no fallback, the groom's parents finally asked the question they should have asked months ago. Where did the money go? That's when someone, I still don't know who, told them it wasn't the groom's family and it wasn't the couple. It was me alone. I got a message that afternoon from the groom's mother. I hadn't spoken to her more than twice before that. She wrote, "I think there's been a huge misunderstanding. Could we talk?" I didn't answer, but she sent another message anyway. A screenshot of a group chat with messages flying between family members. One cousin was basically spilling everything. My name was everywhere. The groom's parents were furious. They'd been told they were hosting, that they were footing the bill. But it turned out they'd been handed nothing but a carefully curated illusion, one that collapsed the second I removed my support. That night, my uncle called, one of the only people in my family who's never used me for anything. He didn't ask why I did it. He just said, "It was going to happen eventually. I'm surprised it took you this long." Then he added, "They're scrambling. Groom's dad is asking where every dollar went. Your sister's having a meltdown." And just like that, I wasn't the bad guy anymore. I was the problem they didn't see coming, the hole in the story they couldn't patch up. That same night, my sister switched tactics. After hours of silence, she started texting again. First was guilt. "I just wanted one perfect day. You couldn't even give me that." Then came desperation. You don't know what this means for me. Then pure venom. You're jealous. That's why you're doing this. You've always hated that I was the favorite. I didn't reply to any of them. By the next morning, everything changed again. Now it wasn't just a personal feud. It was a financial crisis. Canceling the wedding outright would cost them thousands. And suddenly, nobody wanted to be the one left holding the bill. So the groom's dad stepped in. He offered to replace every dollar I pulled, but on one condition. His son would sign a loan agreement. Every cent had to be repaid within 3 months. No exceptions. No handouts. If he wanted a $60,000 wedding, he could wear the debt himself. From what I heard, the fiancé wasn't thrilled, but he signed. There wasn't really another option. The date was locked in. The guests were flying in. My sister was still acting like she had it under control, but the truth was out. Everyone knew now, and there was no way to spin it. The wedding was still on technically, but the foundation they built it on was completely gone. And me? I was already out. The weirdest part of the days that followed was how quickly everything turned. Not just the wedding, the people. It was like a switch flipped the moment they realized I wasn't bluffing. Suddenly, I wasn't family. I was a threat to the illusion they'd been selling for months. And once the groom's side knew the truth, it wasn't just my sister scrambling. It was her fiancé, his parents, and even some cousins who'd somehow been roped into helping with decor and now realized none of it had ever been properly funded. They started asking questions my sister couldn't answer. And every time they turned to me, I gave them the same answer. I'm not involved anymore. But that wasn't the end of it. Not even close. Because now I was thinking about the money, not the venue or catering. Those were gone. I'd already told the venue to keep the deposit just to make the exit clean. But the rest? The gifts I'd already paid for, the Hawaii honeymoon I'd booked under my name, all still mine. So I started pulling the strings one by one. I called the travel agency and explained the situation, told them I was canceling the honeymoon. The rep asked if I wanted a refund or credit. I said, credit. I'll take the trip myself one day. Next, I contacted the stores where I'd ordered the other 5 gifts. The espresso machine, the robotic vacuum, the monogram glass set. Canceled or returned. Most of them hadn't even shipped yet. A few were already on the way, but I rerouted them to my place. Whatever couldn't be refunded, I sold online. Within 48 hours, I had a decent chunk of money back in my account. At this point, word started getting around. My mom left me a long voicemail accusing me of embarrassing the family and shaming my sister during the most important time in her life. I didn't reply. A cousin messaged me asking if it was true I was taking the gifts back. I replied with a single word, yes. The silence after that was amazing. But what came next was even better. Apparently, my sister had still been spinning the narrative, telling friends and extended family that the groom's family was footing everything and that her brother was barely involved. But after the fallout, people started putting it together. She'd lied to everyone. People she owed money to, vendors, mutual friends, even people who were flying in and bringing their own gifts. They all thought she had it covered. Once the groom's side heard about the gifts getting pulled, they weren't even mad. They were impressed. One of his uncles actually sent me a message on Facebook. I hadn't talked to the guy in my life. He said, "You don't owe them anything. Good on you for waking up." By the end of the week, my sister and her fiancé had locked down a new venue. Much cheaper. Nowhere near as nice. They found new catering, also cheaper. Word was they were cutting corners on the decorations, too. The groom looked miserable in every photo I got sent. And my sister? She was still trying to act like nothing happened. They moved forward, but it wasn't the wedding she had dreamed about. It was the one they could afford. And it was happening without me. The wedding went on without me. That was always the plan. Once I pulled everything, I was officially cut off. Scrubbed from the guest list, photos, and group chats like I'd never existed. No invite, no acknowledgement, not even a passive-aggressive text the day of. They thought the silence would sting. Didn't. I had peace for the first time in months. That morning, while they were running around dealing with last-minute changes and duct taping the wedding back together, I slept in. I made coffee. I actually smiled. Felt like I'd skipped my own execution. The new venue was a step down. A community center that had been redesigned for events, which I later saw in photos was code for some fairy lights and mismatched tablecloths. The catering was some buffet-style setup with disposable trays, and they'd slashed the guest list to just over 100 people. They even dropped the live band. My sister was still calling it intimate on Instagram. I figured that was the end of it until about 4 p.m. My phone buzzed. One of my cousins texted me, "Yo, they're talking about you." I didn't respond at first. Then another text came in from someone else. "Check Facebook. You're in the speech." I found the video a few minutes later. Someone had uploaded it to their story, and I could hear every word. It was from the reception during the toasts. After a string of overpracticed, over-complimentary speeches from bridesmaids and groomsmen, someone unexpected got the mic. The groom's uncle, David. I'd only met him once during a planning call that my sister immediately took credit for. He was the quiet type, sat in the background during most conversations. He raised his glass and looked around like he wasn't sure if he should say what he was about to say. And then he did. "I've been listening to a lot of praise tonight, and that's fine. It's a wedding. But let's not ignore the elephant in the room. None of this would have happened without someone who isn't here." A few heads turned. He looked dead at the camera. "Steve, the brother. The one who paid for everything you didn't see today. The venue, the trip, the gifts." He pulled out, "Yeah, but only after being disrespected so badly. I don't know how he lasted as long as he did." The room went quiet. I could hear a fork drop on a plate. Then he added, "Some of you were told stories. Now you know the truth." He raised his glass higher. To Steve. There was an awkward mix of silence, uncomfortable chuckles, and a few claps. Then the video cut. But apparently that was just the beginning. According to another cousin who called me later that night, my sister walked out halfway through dessert. The groom was visibly fuming, trying to keep his composure. The groom's mom, the one who had messaged me earlier, was overheard telling someone, "Well, at least one person in the family has integrity." People were confused. Some asked what happened. A few already knew. My name, the one they tried so hard to erase, became the center of attention in the one place I was never supposed to show up. And here's the twist nobody saw coming. The day after the wedding, I got an email from the honeymoon resort. Apparently, someone had tried to check in under my name 2 days early. No reservation existed anymore, of course. I had canceled it weeks ago and used the credit myself to book a solo trip for later this year. But my sister and her new husband had shown up anyway. Assuming I hadn't actually pulled the plug, they tried to bluff their way into a suite that no longer belonged to them. When the front desk refused, they caused a scene. The resort flagged the account and sent me a heads up. Couldn't believe it. After everything, after taking me for granted, mocking me and cutting me off, they still believed I wouldn't follow through. They thought I'd cave, that I'd show up with the gifts anyway, that I'd swallow the disrespect for the sake of keeping the peace. But I didn't, and they couldn't stand that. I didn't expect to hear anything else after that. I figured the wedding ended in awkward silences and forced smiles, and then everyone would go back to pretending it never happened. But I was wrong. Apparently, the fallout was just getting started. 3 days after the wedding, I got a text from my cousin Rachel. We'd barely spoken in years, but she messaged me like we've been close our whole lives. "I just want you to know not everyone bought the act. You weren't crazy." I didn't even ask what she meant. I knew, but what she sent next caught me off guard. She had recorded a part of the post-wedding brunch that took place at my parents' house. Apparently, a few close friends and relatives had been invited to debrief and wrap up the celebration. My mom, my sister, and the groom's family were all there. They were talking like nothing unusual had happened. My sister was acting exhausted, trying to milk the poor bride who had to pull it all together at the last-minute angle. She even said, "I kid you not, it's actually better that Steve wasn't involved. He's just too intense with things." That's when someone at the table, another relative from the groom's side, a man I never even met, cut in. "I don't know," he said. "From what I heard, if Steve hadn't been involved at all, there wouldn't have even been a wedding to save." The room went quiet in the video. You could hear my sister let out a tiny, awkward laugh. Then he added, It's strange how the person who funded everything got written out of the script so quickly. Makes you wonder what else was rewritten. That wasn't even the end of it. The next day, I got another call, this time from a blocked number. I usually don't answer those, but I did. It was the groom's uncle, David, the one who gave the toast. He said, "You probably don't want to hear from anyone right now, but I thought you should know that speech I gave. I meant every word, and so did a lot of other people there. You might have lost your place with them, but you gained a lot of respect from people who actually watched what happened." We talked for about 5 minutes. He told me that, after the wedding, a group of the groom's relatives actually confronted the groom privately. They asked him straight up why he let me take the fall, why he allowed my sister to lie to everyone about who paid for what. Apparently, the groom got defensive, said he didn't know the full story, but they didn't buy it. And then came the part one didn't expect to hear. The groom's father had drawn up that repayment agreement as a formality. Sure, but now he was enforcing it. The groom had to start making repayments just days after the wedding. No grace period. No exceptions. His parents were treating it like a business arrangement. I was told they had even removed him from access to a family fund he had been depending on. Why? Because the uncle and a few others had told them everything from the beginning, from the car and the Rolex demands to the tech money comment. They were furious. Not just because I pulled out, but because my sister and her new husband built an entire illusion on top of someone else's generosity and then lit it on fire. And here's the kicker. My mom tried to intervene on my sister's behalf. She called the groom's parents to clarify what happened. She told them I'd been unstable lately and they shouldn't take what I did personally. That conversation didn't go the way she thought it would. They told her flat out that they stood by me and that maybe if she had done the same, none of this would have happened. I didn't get invited to the brunch. I wasn't welcome at the wedding, but somehow I still became the center of it, and not in the way they planned. The wedding was over. The photos were posted. The stories were rewritten. But something strange happened after the dust settled. People kept talking. Not publicly, not online, not in group chats, but quietly, through texts and side conversations in moments when no one else was listening. And almost all of them came back to me. A groomsman I'd never even met messaged me weeks later. He said he hadn't realized how much I'd done until after the toast. He said if he were me, he would have burned the whole thing down, not just walked away. A distant cousin called and confessed she'd returned her gift. She told me she felt sick when she realized how they treated me. Said she watched my sister act like a victim all weekend and couldn't stomach it. None of this changed anything officially. My family still pretended like it never happened. But behind closed doors, the story had shifted. I was no longer the one who ruined the wedding. I was the one who refused to be used. That difference mattered more than I expected. 2 weeks after the wedding, I got a call from my mom. The first one since the fiasco. No apology, no explanation. She asked if I could help her apply for something online. Some insurance form she didn't understand. That was it. No acknowledgement of anything that had happened. Just another request. I helped her. Then I changed my number. My dad emailed me, short, vague, typical. Something about how time heals and family always comes back together. I didn't reply. Not because I was angry, but because I finally understood he wasn't talking to me. He was talking to the version of me they all preferred. The silent, obedient, generous one. That version was gone. I started therapy. For the first time, I said things out loud that I'd never admitted even to myself. How I'd been raised to feel like my value came from what I could give. How being useful was treated like being loved. How saying no felt like betrayal. And how long I'd been waiting quietly for someone in my family to notice. They never did. I took the credit from the canceled honeymoon and rebooked it for myself. Solo Hawaii. No itinerary, no plans. I left my phone in airplane mode the entire trip. I hiked quiet trails, sat on beaches until the sun disappeared, ate whatever I wanted, and slept in. I talked to strangers. I didn't think about the wedding once. On the last night there, I sat at the edge of the water and thought about how far things had gone and how little I missed them. No more forced family holidays. No more pretending we were close. No more giving out of guilt. I didn't just lose a sister. I lost the lie that kept me tied to people who only remembered me when it benefited them. And what I gained? Peace, boundaries, freedom. People in my life now don't expect me to fund their milestones or solve their messes. They ask how I'm doing and actually wait for the answer. When I say no, they don't guilt me. When I say yes, it feels like a choice, not a demand. I still get messages from my parents now and then, only when they need something, never just to check in. I don't answer right away. Sometimes I don't answer at all. Depends on the day. My sister hasn't spoken to me once since the wedding. Not even a single word. And that silence is the most honest thing she's ever given me. Now on to the next story. Story 6. I was replacing my parents' roof, saving them $12,000 in labor. My dad filmed me from the yard and sent it to everyone. Look at this joke, trying to prove he's useful. My uncle posted a meme. I packed my tools and left. 3 days later, rain hit. The unfinished roof collapsed into his bedroom. My sister called screaming. Then my mom called, "Fix this immediately." But for 3 days straight, I had ripped shingles in 90 degrees heat while my parents sat in the air conditioning and watched me from the kitchen window. They didn't offer me a drink. They didn't bring out a sandwich. Not once did they ask if I needed help. I was on that roof by myself for free, trying to save them from spending $12,000 on labor. They said they couldn't afford it, that they wanted to put the money toward a dream vacation through Europe. My dad said it would be our first real trip together since the kids, and my mom kept saying it was their reward for surviving 30 years of marriage. So I said I'd help. I knew what I was doing. I'd done side work with a contractor during college and replaced a few small roofs on my own. This one was big, but manageable. I planned every step out in a notebook. I watched YouTube tutorials at night and made material lists down to the last nail. I borrowed a ladder, rented the right tools, bought new gloves, packed my truck, and showed up at their door ready to work. First, they acted thrilled. They hugged me and made a show of gratitude. My mom even said, "We knew we raised a smart one." But the moment I stepped onto the roof, everything changed. Started small. My dad stood in the yard filming me with his phone. I didn't think much of it. I assumed he wanted to show off the progress. But I noticed he wasn't filming the work. He was filming me struggling to lift bundles of shingles up a ladder, slipping slightly on the slope, and pausing to wipe sweat off my face. I saw him zoom in. That night, I heard them laughing in the living room. They'd sent the video to the family group chat. The caption read, "Look at this funny guy trying to prove he's useful." My uncle sent back a meme of a raccoon with a hammer. My sister commented, "At least hire someone hot next time." The next morning, I heard my dad playing it again on the TV. They were watching it like it was a skit. Nobody said a word to me. No thanks, no encouragement. Just laughter from the other side of the window while I was patching their roof under the sun. That's when I saw the printout on the fridge. 2 weeks in Europe. First-class tickets, luxury hotels, spa appointments, and a private food tour in Italy. It was all booked. They made the plans before I even started. They never needed to save the labor cost. They were pocketing it, spending it on themselves. They played me. They knew I'd volunteer. They knew I'd say yes because that's what I always did. I kept working. Quietly, I finished the kitchen side. I layered the shingles over the living room. I toggled the bedroom side and told them I needed another day or two to wrap it all up. Dad laughed and said, "Take your time, superstar." Then he added something about uploading the video to YouTube. I told him I had to leave for a bit and made up something vague about a family emergency. My wife was in surgery, I said. It wasn't true, but it was believable enough to get out of there. I didn't plan to come back. 3 days later, it rained hard. My phone rang just after midnight. It was my sister screaming. The ceiling had caved in over my parents' bedroom. The rain got through the tarp I'd left half secured. Water poured in. The joist gave out. A nightstand was destroyed. My dad's suitcase was soaked through. His camera was toast. The mattress was ruined. It missed their TV and sound system by a few feet. Then Mom called, her voice flat and furious. She didn't ask if I was okay or if I could help. She just said, "Fix it right now." But this time I was done. The morning after the collapse, I woke up to 37 missed calls. Texts were still coming in. One from my sister said, "Get over here before Dad does something he regrets." Another from my mom just said, "This is your mess. You better fix it." No, I didn't respond. I scrolled through them slowly, reading every angry word like I was studying another language. My name over and over again. Their house was falling apart, and they were looking for someone to hang it on. Not each other. Not the guy who'd filmed me and laughed. Me. I figured they'd cool off, but instead they escalated. Around noon, I got a message from my cousin Leah. She lives 4 houses down from them. Apparently, the police had just shown up, 2 cruisers. My parents told them their son had done unauthorized roofing work and abandoned the job. Leah said the cops didn't even go inside. One of them just stood on the sidewalk, asked some basic questions, then shook his head and told my dad to call a contractor next time. My dad tried to get him to file a report. He refused. That must have hit hard because things got uglier after that. By evening, my mom was threatening small claims court. My sister sent me an edited screenshot of the group chat, posting the before and after of the roof like it was a tabloid story. My uncle, of course, jumped in with another meme. A half-collapsed house with the words "DIY nightmare. This is why you call professionals." They were spinning the story into something it wasn't. It wasn't enough that they mocked me. Now I had to be the villain, too. That night, I told my wife everything. She was quiet for a while. Then she said, "They didn't just use you. They humiliated you on purpose." She was right. I kept thinking about that video. The way they watched it like a comedy sketch. The smug way my dad called me superstar as I climbed down that last day. All while they were planning a vacation I was never going to be part of. So I made a choice. I wrote a check for $15,000 and mailed it to them the next day. It was more than they lost. More than the job was worth. No note, no message, just a check. I figured once they cashed it, they'd fix the roof, go quiet, and move on. I was wrong. For days later, I got a voicemail from my mom. No greeting, just her yelling. She said they were looking over some old receipts and realized I still hadn't paid back the $2,000 I borrowed 5 years ago. She said they were talking to their bank and that they might stop the deposit on the check until we sorted out the full amount. That debt? I paid it off within 6 months, on time and in full. And they knew that. But they didn't care about facts. They cared about control. That check wasn't received as a peace offering. It was seen as weakness, proof that they could push harder. Then my dad left a voicemail. Shorter, but worse. "You think you can just walk away from this? We're not done with you, Jacob. You owe us." It wasn't about money anymore. It never had been. I didn't call back. I didn't text. I just sat on the porch that night with my wife and we talked. She said something that stuck with me. "You gave them everything. They gave you nothing, not even basic respect. And now they want more." She asked if I was finally done. I didn't answer right away, but I knew the answer. The silence after blocking them didn't last more than 2 days. I thought maybe they'd get the message that the check was the end of it and I had finally drawn a line they wouldn't cross. But on the 3rd morning, I opened my email and saw a long message from my dad with the subject line, "Read what you owe us." It read like a manifesto. 3 paragraphs in bold, 2 in all caps. He said I had disrespected them, made them look like fools, embarrassed the family, forced them to hire expensive contractors, and worst of all, acted like money could fix what I destroyed. He said the check was a slap in the face, that it felt like I was buying my way out of guilt and that this kind of behavior will not be tolerated in this family. He ended with, "We are considering our next steps, legally if necessary." Attached were photos of their newly repaired roof, the one they managed to fix 2 days after cashing the check. A professional crew in matching shirts stood next to new shingles, all stacked perfectly on the driveway. The caption read, "The way it should have been done the first time. No thank you." No acknowledgement that they were only able to afford it because of me. Just blame. Always blame. I sat there at the kitchen table staring at the screen and, I don't know why, but I started laughing. Not because it was funny, but because it was predictable. I could have written the email myself if I tried. It was exactly the script they always followed. Twist the story, erase the help, shift the blame. But that week, something changed. Out of nowhere, my cousin Eric called. I hadn't heard from him in years. He was always the quiet guy at family gatherings, the one who sat in the corner playing on his phone. He said he saw the video Dad sent to the group chat, the one of me struggling on the roof with a caption mocking me. Apparently, after the collapse, my parents started telling everyone I'd walked out on them halfway through the project, refused to fix it, and dumped the blame on them. They said I left the house dangerously exposed, ignored calls, and had a history of being unreliable. But they forgot that the internet never forgets. Eric had saved the video, the one where Dad mocked me from the lawn, where I was clearly sweating and working alone, where no one offered help. He showed it to his dad, who showed it to 2 more people, and just like that, the story started unraveling. A few days later, I started getting texts. Aunt Deb messaged, "Saw the video. Honestly, Jacob, I don't know how you stayed as long as you did. I would have left on day 1. My cousin Lindsay messaged me, "Your dad sent us that clip like it was comedy. He didn't think anyone would take your side. Glad some of us did." That's when I realized my parents weren't just angry. They were losing their audience. They had told the story their way for years. I was always the struggling son, the one they carried, the one who borrowed and forgot. But now people were remembering things differently, like the way I worked through college to pay rent, the time I lent my dad money for his car repairs and never asked for it back, and the way I used to mow their lawn every weekend when they were out of town, unpaid. They remembered. My parents just didn't think they would. But not everyone picked a side. Some stayed quiet. Others said it was just a misunderstanding. My uncle, the one who'd posted memes, went silent. Not a word since the roof fell in. That silence was almost better than an apology. Then came the voicemail from a blocked number. My mom. She said they'd spoken to a lawyer and claimed they had proof I owed them $2,000 from 5 years ago. She said they were well within their rights to take legal action, that if I didn't acknowledge the debt, they'd file something with the county. She ended with, "Everyone agrees you need to make this right." Everyone. That word landed like a slap. That night, I played the voicemail for my wife while we were eating dinner. She didn't say anything at first. She just put her fork down, opened her laptop, and started typing. When I asked what she was doing, she said, "Drafting a list. Every favor, every dollar you ever paid back, every errand you ran, every hour you worked on that roof. If they want receipts, we'll give them receipts." She kept typing. I sat across from her, watching her build my case like a lawyer in a courtroom. It hit me then. I wasn't alone in this. I never really had been. I just forgot what support looked like because I was raised in a house that never gave any. I stared at the check stub still sitting on the counter. $15,000. That was their price, and I had already paid it. But now they wanted something else. By the end of that week, the list my wife was making had grown into a full-blown document. Dates, screenshots, receipts. Every instance where I'd helped my parents over the years. From the summer I paid their electric bill without telling them to the time I missed a job interview to help my dad haul furniture before their garage sale. She titled the file, "What Jacob Owes versus What Jacob Gave." She even found the transfer logs from when I paid back the $2,000 loan. Each transaction was marked clearly. I remember looking at the final total and realizing I'd actually overpaid by $180. I had no memory of that, but she had it in writing. I was ready to send it all to them. But then something happened. Sunday morning, I was outside watering the plants when a silver SUV pulled up in front of our house. I didn't recognize it until the door opened and my dad stepped out. I froze. I hadn't seen him since the roof collapsed. He didn't have his phone out this time. No smile, no camera. He walked up slowly, looked around like he wasn't sure if he should even be there, and then stopped 5 feet away from me. For a second, neither of us said anything. Then he said, "We need to talk." I asked him how he found my address. He said my sister had it from when she helped us move. I nodded slowly and leaned against the fence. I told him I wasn't sure talking would help. He ignored that and asked if we could sit down. I told him no. So, he stood there sweating and told me he didn't want things to spiral. That was his word. Spiral. Like everything happening was just some bad miscommunication. He said they may have overreacted. but that I needed to understand how stressful everything was. That the vacation wasn't just a trip, it was a celebration of surviving a hard year. That the check I sent was confusing because it felt like an insult. And then he dropped the line that sent me over the edge. "You used to be so grateful. What happened?" That's when I walked back inside. I left him in the yard. Didn't slam the door. Didn't say a word. Just walked back into the kitchen where my wife was watching from the window. She asked if I was okay. I told her, "Not yet, but I will be." I thought that was the end of it, but it wasn't. That night, someone tried to break into my truck. Nothing was taken, but the lock was scratched and the glove compartment was open. Could have been random. Could have been someone looking for change. But my gut said otherwise. My parents knew what kind of truck I drove, and they weren't used to being ignored. I filed a police report just in case. The officer asked if I had any enemies. I just laughed and said, "Only the kind that say they love me." 2 days later, I got a call from a restricted number. Voicemail again. This time it was my mom crying. She said they were hurt, that the family was coming apart, and that they never wanted it to go this far. Then she added something I'll never forget. "You're not the only one who knows how to cut people off." I played that one for my wife too. She didn't say anything. She just reached across the table, took my phone, and blocked the number again. After the break-in attempt and that last voicemail, I expected things to finally settle. There wasn't much left to say, and I'd already taken every precaution short of changing my number. My wife even suggested we think about moving if things got worse. But it wasn't over. Not yet. 3 days later, I was leaving work when I saw a note tucked under my windshield wiper. No envelope, no signature, just folded printer paper. I opened it slowly, already bracing myself. It said, "We won't forget what you did. This won't end until you fix it the right way." No name, no threats, just that. But the handwriting was my mom's. That weird cursive print she used for everything. I recognized it instantly, and the paper smelled like her perfume. The same overpowering floral she sprayed on everything. When I got home, I didn't even bring the note inside. I dropped it into the fire pit and lit a match. My wife and I sat on the patio while it burned, neither of us speaking. I think we both knew that the final thread was snapping. The next morning, my cousin Eric called again. He sounded cautious, like he was walking a tightrope. He said my mom had shown up uninvited at his mom's place in Deb's and caused a full-blown scene. She was crying, accusing everyone of turning on her, and saying I had poisoned the family against her. Eric said she accused me of blackmailing them, of trying to buy silence. She even said she was considering filing a report for harassment. Aunt Deb told her to leave or she'd call the police. It was unraveling. But the worst part wasn't the threats or the guilt trips or even the note. It was that my parents, who once claimed to love me unconditionally, had finally shown me what their love really looked like. It was leverage, nothing more. That night, my wife sat beside me on the couch, laptop in hand. She had the entire timeline open. Every receipt, every text, every bank transaction. She had it color-coded, labeled, and categorized. She said if they tried anything, legally or otherwise, we'd be ready. I thanked her. She said she didn't do it for them. She did it for me. Then she said something I didn't expect. Block them all. Every one of them. For real this time. Not just your parents, your sister too. Anyone who tries to drag you back into this. I hesitated, not because I disagreed, but because I realized how long I'd waited to hear those words. I started with my sister, then a few cousins who had stayed quiet, then the group chat. I removed myself and muted every thread. Finally, I blocked my parents on every platform, email, phone, social media, even the shared cloud folder my mom used to dump family photos into. I deleted everything, and I didn't feel guilt. I felt relief. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't justice. It was survival. I thought maybe they'd try one last move. A knock at the door, a lawyer's letter, something theatrical. But nothing came. Not that week, not the next. Just silence. For the first time, they were the ones waiting for a call. Took 4 weeks for the silence to break. By then, I'd started to get used to the quiet. No more voicemails, no unexpected visitors, no notes on my windshield. I was sleeping better. My wife said I looked like a different person, like I'd finally stopped bracing for something to hit me. But then, out of nowhere, my sister showed up at my job. She just walked in. No warning, no message. She stood at the front desk like she was dropping off a package. But when she saw me, she snapped into gear. "You need to talk to Mom. She's losing it." I told her I was busy. She ignored that. "She's sick over this, Jacob. She barely eats. She doesn't sleep. She says you've ruined the family. And now she remembers the loan." I just stared at her. She went on. Said I never paid it back. She said Mom found an old notebook that proved it and that they were willing to forgive the rest if I just apologized and gave her something back, to make it even. She actually said it like that. To make it even. I didn't raise my voice. Didn't say anything dramatic. I just told her flat out, I paid them. I overpaid, and I won't give them another dollar or another second. She scoffed, called me selfish, and walked out. That night, I told my wife everything. She didn't flinch. She said, "Then it's time." We sat down and wrote a message together, not to be sent, just to be read out loud once and then deleted. It was everything I'd never said to them. Every moment I'd swallowed. Every hurt I'd let go unacknowledged. Every apology I had made that they never earned. And when I finished reading it, I blocked the last remaining number. My parents were now completely cut off. No access, no more stories to twist, no more guilt to weaponize. Nothing. And just when I thought the last chapter had closed, something unexpected happened. That weekend, my dad's brother, the one who never got involved, who rarely spoke at family gatherings, called me. His voice was calm and measured. He said, "I saw the whole thing unfold. I stayed out of it because I thought it would blow over, but it didn't. And I want you to know you did the right thing." I didn't say anything. I didn't know what to say. Then he said something that made everything stop. "You're not the first one they treated like this. You're just the first one who walked away and didn't come crawling back." That silence I'd been living in, it wasn't empty. It was full of all the things I didn't know. All the people who'd watched, waited, and finally saw the truth. In that moment, I knew I wasn't just breaking a pattern. I was ending it. I looked over at my wife. She gave me the smallest nod, like she already knew. And for the first time in my life, I felt free. It's been 2 months since I last heard from my parents. No messages, no phone calls, no sudden visits. Just silence. At first, it felt like a wound had scabbed over. Now, it's starting to feel like fading light, gone, but still leaving its mark. I rebuilt my routine, focused on work, and spent weekends remodeling our home with my wife. We finally finished the sunroom she'd always wanted. It's now our favorite corner of the house. Bright, peaceful, and full of possibility. We laughed there over morning coffee, planning trips together on our terms. Then, last week, something shifted. A knock at the front door. Standing there was my niece, my sister's young daughter, holding a small fern in a chipped terracotta pot. She was nervous and quiet, like she wasn't sure what she was doing there. "Uncle Jacob," she began, tears in her eyes. "Mom told me to give you this, and she asked to say sorry." I knelt down. My heart sank and held its breath. The fern felt heavier than it should have. I'd missed birthdays and Christmas. I hadn't seen her since she was 5. Now she's 8. She looked taller, more guarded, but hopeful. Before I could say a word, she turned and walked back across the yard, heading to the gate. Then the rustle of footsteps and a voice, her mother's, calling, "Leave it, Kira. Come home." That was it. A glimpse, a gesture, a message half said. I brought the fern inside. It needs repotting and better soil. I left it near the window. Its fitting their apology came half alive, wilted around the edges, unsure of its place. My wife watered it gently. That night, I found myself thinking, families are messy. Apologies even messier. But forgiveness isn't binary. It's a path, not a switch. Maybe this little plant is the start of something new. Or maybe it'll stay a reminder that some things won't grow without commitment from both sides. We have reached the end. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to like and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this, and give us your thoughts about the stories in the comments section. Thank you and see you in the next video.